seagulls follow trawler. It's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much.
Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Talking nonsense. So I thought, no, enough's enough. Why should I put up with that? Don't back down, double down. Don't back down, double down.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome along once again. It is the Bustalgia World Tour continuing, the time machine travelling version of the bus. So yeah, welcome aboard, because tonight is going to be an interesting show to say the least. One would say maybe it's a Celtic Da episode, because we're going back to that era, yes, that one, where Celtic in the 90s are going to be mentioned many times in the same sentence. But hey, on the Celtic Years, as I promised when I told you we're going to go this way, we're not just going to look at seasons where we win all the time, but we're going to go back and look at seasons where it didn't go too well, or in this case, a few seasons where it didn't go too well, a collective bunch all put together. Because yes, we shall be covering the years 1990 to 94, taking us up to the takeover of Fergus McCann. So I've got myself an expert team around me, and obviously Fergus McCann, a good like there, because our man from Canada himself, Liam Greenlaw. How are you doing, mate?
I'm great, Phil. How are you?
I'm absolutely smashing, mate. I'm really glad to have you on this week, man, because I'm looking forward to picking your brain on this one, because, yeah, it's going to be a good one. We've also got the other Logue that is on the Voice of Us. We've got Johnny Logue tonight, David's dad. So, Johnny, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's the first time I've been on the Bustalgia, so I know it's a bit of a long route, so I've brought myself some sandwiches for the break.
Good idea. Yes, good idea. So,
that's good coffee for me, so keep me going to the end of the journey. So, but yeah, looking forward to it. It's taking me back to the dim and distant past a bit, so we'll see how we go.
Good man. I'm glad to see you've been following the show, because yes, these episodes do tend to go for quite a while. So well done in getting prepared for that, the coffee and the sandwiches. And Mark Kearney has joined me again. And Mark, I'm looking forward to having you on tonight, mate, because some of the stuff you've told me off camera about this era is going to be good. But how are you tonight, mate? How are you feeling ahead of this one?
I'm doing very well, mate. I'm kind of dreading the fact that you have to talk about guys like Tony Cascarino and Andy Walker's second stint, but I'll get through that with some water that's, vodka that's dressed up like water. So that actually is water. That's a school night, I kind of do that. But I'm looking forward to this, guys, as much as it's a depressing era. I think it's always good to look back and see how far we've come.
Indeed. And yeah, I just thought this is the second episode of the Celtic Years. So I thought, let's get that 90s episode out the way nice and early. Let's get it. We'll come in nice and easy with the 07-08 season, a good season, then we'll just get this one out of the way, and that's it dealt with. So yeah, it's going to be an emotional roller coaster tonight. As I said last night when I was doing the Monday/Tuesday club, for anyone in the comments that was going to Celtic Park during this era, had any interactions with Celts for Change, or was even part of Celts for Change, be sure to get your comments in as we're talking about that, because again, this is an education for me, this episode, because I don't have many vivid memories of anything before the takeover. So this will be a really good one for myself as well, just to learn and hear from experiences. But yeah, before we get into that, I'll do all of the things that I'm contractually obligated to do as I am the driver tonight. So remember, folks, to like, share, comment, and all that other good stuff. If you wish to become a member, you can indeed. Now, folks, as you know, Bustalgia, we've always got a trivia question to start. And even though I have went back to the same source that I used last week, and let's be honest, Celtic Wiki, you let me down quite a bit last week with the Dutch player scandal, because he hadn't even updated the bloody page. But the ironic bit was they had Bernabei listed under Argentinian players, so they clearly updated the page. But they're Netherlands players, they were missing Frimpong, and they were missing Braafheid. But I've had to go back to Celtic Wiki for this one. So guys, there'll be 10 answers that I'm looking for. A whopping 10. So the question tonight is, one of the few glories, if you want to call it that Celtic had during this year, was they won the Tenants Sixes. There were 10 players involved in the squad. I'm looking for the 10 player names that were involved in the Tenants Sixes. So there you go.
I'll write this down then.
Yeah. So
do you want any answers just now, no?
No. We'll come back to the end of the show. It's just one of these ones to get you thinking at the start. But yeah, there were 10 players overall registered for the Tenant Sixes in 92, and I am looking for the 10 player names. When I look through the list, I think 9 of them pretty much, but there's one in particular out of the 10 where I'm just like, who on earth is that? I have no idea. The rest of them I could probably figure out if I had a chance to sit and think about it, but I swear there's one where I'm just like, who is he? So yeah, we will come back to that later. So yeah, there's 10 players involved in the Tenants Sixes is tonight's question.
So that was 10 current players at the time, was it?
Yeah, because I'm sure the younger
Okay.
viewers will be like, what's the Tenants Sixes? We will be talking about that at some point later on. I'll explain exactly what it is. But yeah, it was the only kind of silverware you could call it that Celtic won in that time period, which is quite a grim thought. Anyway, we'll move on to other football headlines first, because as we do on Bustalgia, we always take a look at what was going on at the time. Now, obviously, I'm not just going to start with just like one particular season, but I've obviously putting 4 seasons into one. So I'm just going to cover a sort of spectrum just of 1990 and 94, the big football headlines first and foremost, what was going on. And we start with the 1990 World Cup. That was won by Germany. They beat Argentina 1-0 in the final, Italia 90. 1992, the shocking outcome of the European Championship, it was Denmark that won it, defeating Germany in the final. They were unexpected winners because they didn't even qualify. A war broke out in Yugoslavia, which forced Yugoslavia out of the tournament, and Denmark came in as a late replacement and ended up going on and winning the whole thing. And I've covered this already in Bustalgia. The World Cup in 1994, held in the USA, was won by Brazil. The Roberto Baggio penalty miss that was held around the world when they, after a quite drab 0-0 draw, it was very famous for Baggio skying one over the bar in the penalty shootout. Now, in the season of 92-93, there's a bit of rebranding going on in the world of football, because the old European Champions Cup became the UEFA Champions League in 92-93. So the final ever European Cup old format was won by Barcelona in 92, defeating Sampdoria 1-0 at Wembley. And then the first ever official Champions League winner, bit of a surprise one to many, it was Marseille, where they defeated AC Milan 1-0. And Basil Bowley, who'd gone to play for Rangers, scored the winner in the final. Although a year after this, Marseille were caught up in a bit of a match-fixing scandal, because it turned out that they'd been paying off like referees and so forth to get some favourable results, and that was resulting in them being the champions of France. So they actually had their 93 title stripped from them, but they retained the Champions League, although over the years I have seen our pals across the city talking about how they should have been awarded this one. It's like, well, no, it would be awarded to AC Milan, who were the runners-up. That's how it would work. They wouldn't award it to a team that were in the group stages with them. But anyway, they'll do anything. Just cling on for anything.
As if that matters to them, mate. The truth lies. It doesn't matter to them, mate. So whatever suits them.
It does indeed. And other rebranding that went on, people might say this was the death of modern day football. The English First Division got rebranded. The Sky TV called it. It was a whole new ball game, because the old English First Division became the FA Premier League in the 92-93 season. Originally it was going to be a shared TV deal between ITV and Sky, and ITV dug their heels in and were like, no, we want all of it or none of it. And then the FA were just like, okay, fine, and just awarded it all to Sky. And yeah, football has never really been the same since. That was the beginning of it. I mean, it would take a few years before it would really start to kick in. But yeah, nowadays, the English Premier League is one of the massive contributors to the greed and massive inflation in world football. But that's when it started, the 92-93 season. It turns out that Leeds were the final champions of the old First Division when it was the top flight, and the 93 season, of course, was the beginning of Man United's dominance. They won the title, the first Premier League in 1993. Now, transfer-wise, the world record was set in 1992 when Italian forward Gianluigi Lentini moved from Torino to AC Milan for £13 million. He would hold on to that record until Alan Shearer moved from Blackburn to Newcastle in 1996 for £15 million. I was looking up the Lentini things. I remember this being mentioned to me years ago that he was the record holder for Shearer. I looked at the his goal stats on Wiki, and I was like, I think AC Milan must have felt a bit ripped off at the time, because even looking back on like footage from then, like he was never really a player that like made a dent in that AC Milan team, because this is one that had like Hullet, Van Basten, Rijkaard, the sort of early 90s. But yeah, Lentini, he was the world record holder for a short period in the early to mid 90s.
He had his career cut short by a car accident, though, didn't he?
Was that what happened to him? Right.
Yeah,
okay.
he was. I think he was coming back from training, and he was involved in a car accident. He was in a coma and injuries, and he was out. And he ended up just dropping down further and further down the Italian leagues until he was forced to retire.
As Monty says here, puts it so bluntly, Lentini was pish. There we go. Monty has spoken, everybody. There we go. There you go. According to Monty. So there we go. Let's see, we've got else here. Anyone else say about Lentini? No, I say he was just a player that, you know, I'd heard about him, but when I looked at his goal record, I was like, oh man, AC Milan must have felt a bit cheated. But yeah, when you do look at that AC Milan squad in the early 90s, it's like, how is he even going to get in that team anyway? But other stories from the world of football as well. So the Ballon d'Or winners through this whole period: 1990, it was won by Lothar Matthäus. 1991, it was Jean-Pierre Papin. Marco van Basten won it in 1992. Roberto Baggio in 93, and it was in 1994, Liam Greenlaw. Too many Liams on this show. Liam Greenlaw, you will probably know this one. Do you know who won the 1994 Ballon d'Or?
Clinton?
No, the idea.
Oh, mate, Risto Stoichkov.
Oh, was that Risto?
It was Risto, mate. 94 World Cup, Bulgaria did pretty well, didn't they? So Risto Stoichkov won the 94 Ballon d'Or, mate. He was at Barcelona at the time, I think, as well.
That's right. He went to Barcelona, and he went to, I think after that, he went to Parma. All of a sudden, they stuck with loads of money, and then I think he went back to Barcelona. He lasted a year in Parma. It was terrible. Nearly played in Scotland.
No way, really? Who fought?
I think it was St Mirren or something that was remember like people like Ronaldinho and all that back then.
Oh yeah.
In Bulgaria, trained in Scotland, and he loved it there. He always thought it was a good place to play. Some of the ones I think Celtic I would have loved to have seen them get him before Petrov. You know, imagine Stoichkov in the hoops. What a player!
Oh my God! Now you're talking, mate. Jeez, that would have been obscene, man. Absolutely obscene. But I didn't know that one. But I remember the story about Ronaldinho and was it St Mirren or something like that? Like a trial he was offered or something. Oh man, imagine the timeline, the alternate universe if that had happened. Oh my God.
Who was the one that ended up at Man City, but he was in St Mirren for about a week, and he ended up buying a bike and riding away for him? Was it Paris? No, Paris. Who was the one? He went to. I think he went to Leicester. Mahrez.
Oh, Mahrez. Oh, right, okay.
He was at St Mirren and ended up buying a bike and fucking cycling straight till he hit somewhere different than St Mirren. That's just part of the crazy world of Scottish football, you know what I mean? Some of the names that have popped up, you know what I mean?
He was the Spanish player at St Mirren had. He was an ex-Spanish internationalist.
Oh,
midfielder.
God. This is a controversial one, John. I get chinned on Bustalgia because I got one of my trivia questions wrong, because I did one. It was who's played in European Championship finals and also played in Scottish football. And apparently the 84 Spain team, there was a guy that went on to play for St Mirren late in his career. And somebody like Patrick McLaughlin or Pato in the comments were shouting it. And the thing was, even if I'd put it down as an answer, and obviously I'm aiming my question at Russell on these ones, me and Russell would have been doing that show for bloody days, because he would never have got it. It would just be like, I can't give him any
I can't
clues.
remember his name at all. Like, but
Yeah.
just do a
Oh, there you go.
big memory
Morty
of
and
him, yeah.
Stephen Coulthard telling us it's a guy named Victor, one of those
Yeah.
Spanish guys with one name, basically. Victor.
No, never heard of him, but I do remember they got that ex-Man U player a few years ago, and he was an absolute dumpling. What was his name again? He was quite a big player for Man U, and I don't know if he's had some sort of accident as well, and his career was kind of stumbling because of it. But he's over there maybe, less than a decade ago. He was, what was his name again? But he went into St Mirren and played
Do you
about
remember
half
his
a season
nationality
for
at all?
No, mate.
No.
I'm only going back. I'm not going to try and describe him, mate, because I'll get in trouble. But I can't remember his name now. But he was at Man U, and he was pretty a big name. You know, I think he may have had like a double barrel name.
Mm-hmm.
What was his name again?
Somebody in the
somebody will tell us in the comments. Please tell me.
Aye. Scott Howe is asking in the comments, where is Russell? So Scott, I've not seen you in the comments last couple of days. Russell's back on Thursday, basically. He's back tomorrow. Monday night was a day of recovery, shall we say, from a hangover. Last night, myself, Mark, and David did the Monday / ended up being on a Tuesday club. And yeah, Bustalgia now has evolved into the Celtic Years. Russell and me doing the tournament one was just over the summer. Now it's going to be me with 2 or 3 others. So, but I think Russell's coming back on Bustalgia for the Chris Sutton special, which is coming up in a few weeks as well. But yeah, Russell will be back on tomorrow night, so if you're looking for him, he will be there. Brighton,
I think it's Eric Jemba.
Jemba. Oh yeah. Oh, he was rotten.
I read rotten. You know what I mean? It's like it's been alright.
Ryan Kelly, Eric
Dugan was at
Jemba.
St
There you
Johnstone
go.
as well. Was that?
Ryan Kelly saying Eric Jemba. Aye, there it is.
With Michael Dugan at St Johnstone as well. We spoke about the Dundee guys. You know what I mean?
Oh, Dundee, yeah.
They were owned by the Saddam Hussein's lawyer. Remember?
Yes.
Giovanni
Di Stefano.
Di Stefano, yeah, something like that, yeah.
I mean, the guy who was Saddam Hussein's lawyer was a chairman at Dundee. I still can't get my head around that. You know, I really can't. But
again,
what a wacky world Scottish football is.
As mate, I say people going about English football being the best league in the world. They ain't got the character and the soul that Scottish football's got. I'll tell you that much for nothing.
No,
so I'm going to go over some major news headlines as well, just to again that went and happened between 1990 and 94. So this actually has a massive effect. The next 2 headlines on the world of football. I've mentioned this before on Bustalgia because there was a period where Scotland used to qualify a lot for tournaments in the 70s and 80s and so forth, even into the early 90s. But then the breakup of the Soviet Union happened, and also the breakup of Yugoslavia happened, which then provided us with lots of new countries. So when the USSR broke up between 88 and 91, we also had to follow the Berlin Wall. But the countries that came from that were Russia on its own, Belarus, Ukraine, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Lithuania, Estonia, Georgia, Latvia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And I say with the Yugoslavian war, the aforementioned one that caused them to get thrown out of Euro 92, we ended up with countries like Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Slovenia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo all became sovereign nations in their own right. As I say, that's been an effect on Scotland, who used to qualify quite frequently for tournaments. But you've now got countries like Croatia, who had, despite having a smaller population in Scotland, got to the World Cup final a few years ago. Only a population of 3 million, and they've been in a World Cup final. Incredible to think. So yeah, it has had a sort of knock-on effect on us when it comes to trying to get out qualifying groups. Another headline as well, I mentioned this before on Bustalgia because it was in the 94 one, but this is the year 1990 is the year that Nelson Mandela was set free from prison. He would go on to become the president of South Africa in 94. But one thing I mentioned about Nelson Mandela when we brought him up on that one was nowadays on the internet, they have a thing called the Mandela effect, a conspiracy, where it's like a lot of people years ago had this massive recollection that Nelson Mandela had died. They all watched his funeral. There's thousands of people that all thought this was like a thing that happened, and obviously it wasn't true. But of course, here in the West Central Scotland, we've got what we call the 2012 effect, where there's thousands and thousands of people who are certain the Rangers died in 2012, but apparently we're wrong. Apparently we imagined it. I can't believe it, man. Mark, obviously I know you'll have a lot to say on that one, but yeah.
That was actually like a time warp that I crawled into at that time, because I'm pretty sure I seen them lose their license because they weren't their club anymore, and then get their proposal to get into the Premier Division knocked back. They end up getting their license granted with certain provisos, but they'd have to start in the 3rd division. But that was just me. I might be a memory that I made up in my head, mate. I don't know, but one thing's for sure, it was funny.
Aye, apparently all of us made it up in our heads. We keep getting told, even though
Aye.
back then the journalists were reporting it as fact, and now the same journalists are like, "Oh no, that didn't happen. Didn't happen, guys. Just move on. Nothing to see here, guys. Nothing to see here." Other stories as well during that time is the evil witch herself, Margaret Thatcher, resigned as Prime Minister, but unfortunately the Tories were still in control because John Major took over. It would take a few more years before they would be ousted when Tony Blair got in. Over in America, George Bush Sr. lost the American election in '92 to Bill Clinton. In '93, Colombian kingpin drug lord himself, Pablo Escobar, was gunned down. And years before the events of 9/11 happened, there was actually another terrorist attack at the World Trade Center where a bomb inside a truck was set off in one of the car parks under the North Tower. 6 fatalities from it and over 1,000 people were injured. In terms of quick wee rush over music in the early 90s, because we always try and touch on it, although with Russell though being here, because he is the music man, he loves to delve into all that stuff. But yeah, the early 90s is a bit of a concoction of everything. So you've got the Manchester sound, the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays, but there was also an American invasion of grunge rock, so bands like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, they all had big hits. And then there was also a massive rise of like dance, acid house and techno music in the UK, with things like The Shaman, Too Unlimited and Culture Beat all getting #1 hits throughout the 1998, 94. So yeah, but everything was going on before the Britpop era really took over in the mid-90s. And as for the biggest grossing films in each of the years, some classics here. So 1990, the big film at the box office was Ghost. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was the big one in 91. Batman Returns in 1992. Jurassic Park 1993. And The Lion King in 1994. Now, guys.
That's class, mate. That is class movie. See, just now, it's just utter shite on the cinema, isn't it? I was looking at the cinema maybe 2 weeks ago, trying to find something to watch, and it just utter shite, so it is. And imagine the films. What's that, mate? Sorry?
Behave yourself. I lived through that time. Those movies were utter shite at the time.
Oh, come on. Don't
Jurassic Park was awesome, man. The new Jurassic movies are terrible.
Jurassic Park wasn't class. Even films like Ghost. I'm not a big fan of Ghost, but that'll live forever, that film. You know what I mean?
Was that right?
You're not going to be watching fucking... what's the films that just new? Films about fucking guys that are actually mermaids, you know what I mean? And they're superheroes. That's not going to last forever, all that shit. Nah, they're classics for Phil. Don't you listen to him up there?
Don't hold back, Mark. Just say exactly what you're thinking, mate.
This is why we got Mark on, man.
They wanted to chase you to Canada. Isn't they one of the chase you to Canada?
No. No, that's why we've got Mark on and say, just basically like Jurassic Park. This was the year that they released the Jurassic World Dominion. I've not seen it, but all the reviews absolutely panned it. I mean, all the Jurassic films basically since Jurassic Park have been just progressively worse and worse. So, yeah, Hollywood ran out of ideas a long time ago. Nowadays, it's really bad sequels and remakes, essentially. Disney are just going through their back catalogue and just doing like CGI versions of classic animated ones. So it's not good at all in Hollywood. But anyway, speaking of not good, obviously we'll have to start to get into this palaver with Celtic. So yeah, setting the scene. So yeah, guys, to understand, before we go right into the crux of the 1990s for Celtic, we need to set the tone, go back to the 80s, and yeah, we have to understand all the incidents that happened in the run up to this. So yeah, it's a really mental decade for Scottish football. I'm surprised it's still mental nowadays, as you just said, Mark. But yeah, in the 1980s, not Celtic or Rangers are the top team in the country. It's Aberdeen. Aberdeen are the top team. They won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1983. They won the Scottish title in 1980, 84 and 85. They won the Scottish Cup in 82, 83, 84 and 86. And they were also League Cup winners in 1986. A man by the name of Alex Ferguson. Wonder if he'll want to do anything in the game. He was their manager at the time. But yeah, they were an absolute force in the 80s. But not only that, Jim McLean's Dundee United were also doing bits as well, because they won the title in 1983 and very famously got to the UEFA Cup final in 1987, only to lose to Gothenburg. But along the way, they beat Barcelona at 90'S and in the new camp. They're the only Scottish team that have got a 100% record against Barcelona. Astounding. Again, Scottish football, you can't write it. But Celtic did get their share of trophies in the sort of early to mid part of the 1980s. They won the league in 81 and 82. They won the Scottish Cup in 1980, very controversial one. That's the one that led to the drinks ban when George McCluskey deflected Danny McGrain's shot into the net late in extra time, and then the riot, the Hampden riot, happened. So that's what led to the drinks ban in Scottish football. But we won the Scottish Cup that day in 1980. In 1985, we won it as well. We also picked up the 1983 League Cup. Billy McNeill started the decade as the manager before leaving in 83. David Hay came in to replace him before leaving in 87, and McNeill returned. But one thing that was constant in the early to mid part of the 1980s is Rangers were absolutely fucking garbage. Absolutely terrible. They did not win a title for the first part of the decade. They won one Scottish Cup in 81. Their trophy seemed to be the League Cup. They won that a few times, 82, 84, and 85. Things, however, were about to change for Rangers, and unfortunately that also meant it changed for Celtic, because in 1988, a businessman by the name of David Murray would take over at Rangers, buying them after having a bid for Ayr United thrown out, and he turned his attention to Rangers. When you actually think about that, it's like, wait a minute, they were a second choice? What? So I bought Rangers in 1988 for £6 million. Now, in 86, a few years before that, though, they had appointed Graham Souness as manager, which brought its own degree of profile. But something else played right into their hands. Obviously, he's come up from England after playing for Liverpool for years. I say he's a big name in the game down there. But an incident happened in 1985 at Heysel Stadium in Belgium in the European Cup final between Liverpool and Juventus, where a riot broke out. 39 fans were killed and over 600 were injured, mostly Juventus fans. The UEFA and the authorities found Liverpool fans being responsible for the riot and the deaths that happened and all the injuries. So as a result, English teams were banned for the next 5 years from playing in European football, Liverpool 6 years in particular. So I say Graham Souness had just come up to Glasgow to take over at Rangers. All of his pals, so all these who got down in England now, all these players that have ambitions of playing in Europe, they can't now. But there's a team just up the road in Scotland that can. So Rangers began exploiting that for all it was worth, because some of the names they brought in were like Terry Butcher, Ray Wilkins, Chris Woods, Gary Stevens, Mark Walters, Mark Hateley, and Trevor Stephen, who were all England internationals in their own right over the next few years. And then it only accelerated even more when Murray came in and took over as chairman in 88, because not only that, did they have the profile as soon as they also now had the money as well. So that was playing right into their hands. But despite all this, despite going up against this this juggernaut that was growing in Govan, Celtic still managed to get a few trophies under their belt. Now, the 1986 title, we'll have to talk about this one. I'll come to you on this one, John, if you remember this, because this was the one where we picked Hearts on the last day, where Albert Kidd came to the rescue, where we had to beat St Mirren by, I believe, was it 3 goals or more? We had to beat them at Love Street.
Yeah, I think it was 3, yeah.
Yeah, we won 5-0 in the end, but we needed Hearts basically to lose at Dundee. And I believe Albert Kidd was also a Celtic fan, wasn't he?
Yes, that's the legend anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we were 4-0 up at half time in that game, I think, weren't we?
Something like
Because
that.
I remember, I mean, we couldn't, obviously, back then we couldn't watch it, so I was up at my dad's and we were listening to it on the radio, like, you know, and obviously we were listening more in hope than expectation, it would have to be said.
Yep.
You know, we didn't expect, I mean, I think Hearts had gone on a ridiculously long winning streak, and we just didn't see it collapsing on the last day of the season. And then it came through, we could go. Unlike at Ibrox, we weren't confused as to what kid it was who scored.
Yeah.
Because across in Ibrox, apparently the story goes that when it came over the radios and whatnot, people got mixed up and thought it was Walter Kidd who scored.
Oh, okay.
And not Albert Kidd. And Ibrox started to cheer, or the fans at Ibrox started to cheer. And it must be the only time that Rangers supporters have cheered what was effectively a goal that was helping Celtic. So that was quite funny. And then, of course, he repeated the trick and scored again. So he scored the 2 goals, and it was quite a good night in the end.
Yeah, it was. I can remember the footage. You guys will have seen this. I think is it Paddy Bonner standing with the ball? He's about to punt it out. It might be St Mirren's goalkeeper, and there's a backdrop on the Celtic fans behind him, and they just suddenly erupt. And I think it's like Jock Brown or Jerry McNee on commentary. He's like, "Oh, that must mean a goal for Dundee." And they're just going absolutely mental. But Liam, I'll come to you this one because you'll definitely have seen this goal, and over time, it's maybe one of the best goals Celtic have scored, but sadly, the person at the end of this goal was forever exiled. But yeah, we did score a very famous goal that day, one of the best team goals you'll ever watch, literally passing it all the way up the park. Almost every player gets a touch, but sadly, that wee shit Maurice Johnston was on the end of it. But it was some goal, wasn't it? Let's be honest, it was actually a screamer of a goal.
I mean, I think that's what made him iconic at that point, whereas, Maurice Johnson was your boy at that time, and the way he celebrated everything about that, and then made it so harsh, when he turned the tables up, because it's like that's the moment that everybody associates with him.
Aye, I know. Aye.
So you're not just like signing for Rangers, you're depriving us of that moment. Now I look at that now and I can't enjoy that.
Same, I know, and I was even like paying attention to football at that time. But even when I look back on it, and it's like, oh, it's a good goal, but it's like, it's him, man. Fuck, man, it's so annoying.
Well, I ran
see,
Liam
and John. Sorry, I'll carry on. Carry on, Liam.
I went to a Toronto FC game when he was the manager, and somebody
he played in the MLS.
Aye, he was the first manager for Toronto. And so he came in, a mate of mine got me into the box, and I went and I was wearing a Celtic tracksuit. And I don't know if any of he got done for nicking tracksuits, right? Or selling them. I don't know.
He did, didn't he?
Aye. And he came up to me, and the first thing he says, I really like your tracksuit jacket. And I says, I better not put it in then.
Aye. Come back on it.
But, he ended up an all right guy. He was with Tommy Burns' kids, and he brought them out to Canada, and he supposedly did that every year and stuff. So, anyway.
Aye. Oh, he'll be coming up in a few minutes again anyway in the old the retrospective year of the 80s, because something bad's about to happen around him. But 86 title we pipped on the last day. Rangers ended up winning the title in 87, but then of course, John, you say you were going to games at this point as well. The magic of the centenary season happened, despite Rangers becoming a bit of a juggernaut at that point. Just it felt like nothing was going to stop Celtic in the 87-88 season. Obviously they won the Scottish Cup and League Cup double. I don't know if they're the only team that's achieved it, but basically win a League and Cup double in their centenary season. It's got to be quite a rare thing, but you were frequenting Celtic Park at that point. I mean, I've seen the footage of the Happy Birthday Celtic sing-along was at the Dundee game at the end of the season, and it's like, it's fantastic.
I mean, it's got to be said without doubt, it's my favourite league title. As I was saying to you on when we were off air, it so happened that I changed jobs just before that season started, and I used to work every Saturday, couldn't get to very many games. Started in this new job, didn't work any Saturdays, so I was able to go to the games. Didn't need season tickets back then, so we were at most of the games. I was at most of the games, and it was just brilliant. And of course, the semi-final Scottish Cup and the final were big stick-outs in the memory as well, like with the late winners and scoring winning goals and just celebrating the double. It was well, you couldn't. If you at the start of the season, if you'd scripted it, I don't think we'd have believed it. To be honest with you, I think again we went into that season more in hope than real expectation. And although we did have some decent players, and McNeil did buy. I mean, I like Chris Morris. He bought Chris Morris off a Sheffield Wednesday, and I always liked him. And I don't think he was with us that long. I think he was only with Celtic 2, maybe 3 years, if that. But his first season in the centenary, it was a bit like Izagiri. He was really good in his first season and probably did take a drop in the second season. But I like Chris Morris. We signed him, signed Billy Stark, and he was a cracking buy, Billy Stark. I always liked Billy Stark. He was a quality player anyway. And of course, there was Andy Walker from Motherwell, first time around. So we had a decent team, but to say, we're going to win the league this year, I don't think I didn't really expect it, but we enjoyed it all the same.
Oh, definitely. Says when you go back and look at the old footage, especially there's the game at Ibrox where all sorts of guys were sent off. Like 4 players were sent off, and McAvenny squaring up to Chris Woods and stuff like that. And then there's this. I think it was a 2-each draw, that one. But there's a second game they play at Ibrox when Paul McStay scores an absolute scintillating volley from outside the box. Oh, it's one of my favourite pictures at Celtic where you go and Celtic Wiki, or you look up images on Google, and it's the image of him celebrating, and it's like the backdrop of like the stand or the Celtic fans just celebrating. It's like, oh, just such a great moment, just the look on his face scoring that goal. You're like, that's what it's all about, man. It's just phenomenal stuff. Now, Mark, I know that you're going to have a field day tonight talking about this, but here's something for you. After the 88 season, winning that double, Celtic failed to strengthen from position of strength. Where have you heard that one before, mate? That's going to be a running theme going forward, because Rangers completely upped the ante going into the 88-89 season. More spending, recklessly, probably. A little more conservatively from Celtic when it came to transfers in the market. But they did manage to salvage one more trophy in 1989, even though Rangers won the Scottish League and League Cup. They were going for a treble, but in the Scottish Cup final, Joe Miller pops up to score the winner. Quite an infamous goal, because Rangers fans still mump and moan about it to this day, because they should have got a throw in about 30 seconds beforehand that we get the throw in and end up scoring off of. But yeah, it's good to know that one still lives rent free in their head, mate.
Oh, definitely. We've all seen the goal. I just apologise to Liam. I don't know if it was my signal or your signal, but I wasn't cutting you off there, mate. It was, I thought you'd stop talking and there's a wee lapse on it, so I apologise for cutting you off there, Liam.
There's probably a delay anyway from my side, so any problem, mate.
Well, just a bit of interesting information for you two, especially when you mentioned the radio commentary from the 1986 game. See if you go onto YouTube, guys, the full Clyde 1 Super Scoreboard episode from that day is on YouTube from start to finish. And you should get that listen to it. It's one of my favourite listens. But anyway, we'll go back to what was the point there?
Just saying about 89, and then just saying that, you know, Celtic didn't strengthen from position of strength. What a surprise.
No, this is indicative of Celtic throughout their recent history. I said recent history. Ironically, it was only about a year or so after that a young upstart named Peter Lawwell in 1990 took over as financial director, I think they call him. And he did pretty well. But granted, the period, they lost Mo Johnston. He was supposed to have signed for Celtic. There's a picture of him inside the Celtic main stand with Billy McNeil, and he's wearing a woolly jumper, and he's giving the Celtic top, and he puts it on. And how that was allowed to slip through the Celtic board's hands, I never know. But finances played a big part back then, and that was when about the time that Fergus McCann had made his first inroads to buy the club, and the finances weren't looking too great at that point. They were kind of up and down, and I think that's when the seeds were beginning to be sown for financial mess for Celtic, and maybe that's where we're seeing the lack of investment in the players, and that's when we started to see guys like Mark McGee and all the rest of it, who did really well for Celtic, but they're in their latter, about 36, 37 the time they came to Celtic, and did well in the centenary year, but with guys like that in the team, and it was destined to come to an end eventually, and Rangers had just started on the crest of a wave. As you said, they took advantage of the 5-year ban by the UEFA for English-based teams. So Rangers just took advantage, as they do, and Celtic just couldn't keep up with them at that time, Philip, I'm afraid.
They did indeed. And as I say here, I know it's the 1989 Scottish Cup final. Little did Celtic fans know at that time that would be the last significant silverware they would lift until 1995. But yeah, and as you mentioned it there as well, the botched Maurice Johnson deal. The story that I heard, well, again, it was one of these like documentary things, like, you know, that I think it was the Scotland's game or those things the BBC used to do. That was a team that was. It was one of the type of documentaries. And I think the story goes that the deal obviously wasn't signed, because if his name's not in the bit of paper, then it's not a done deal. And I think it was McGinn, the chairman, basically popped his head in the door, and it was like McNeil was talking to Johnson, just says, look, just pretend you've signed. Just go in front of the press and just pretend you've signed. We'll get it all finalised tomorrow. And that's how it all happened. He sat there saying, oh, yeah, so this is the club I've always wanted to play for, with that mad jumper on, that pure gaudy monstrosity he was wearing. And turns out, obviously, it wasn't signed, and Rangers caught wind of it, got him over at Ibrox, and of all the people to sign and say, it's tarnished it. I say that goal that they scored at Love Street is incredible, and now you can't look back on it and go,
I think he scored 2 that day, Phil.
He scored
2 that day. In fact, we did the exact same thing to Partick Thistle with Frank McAvenny. He was pictured inside halfway circle with John Lambie with the Partick Thistle strip, and he hadn't signed yet officially, and Celtic had just made the phone call and just said, which was surprising because Celtic owed the guy a lot of money for his previous contract. They never get paid. And that's one of the reasons why he left Celtic, for unpaid wages.
Right, okay.
But I was at a speaker night and he was talking about it candidly, and that's what happened. We did the exact same thing to Partick Thistle, but I just think what a blipper that was. I think the guy was I think he was a top paid player in France at the time.
Wow.
Mo Johnson, before he came back to Celtic, I believe, and it would have been a right coup to get him back. But Celtic at that time, being Celtic, just made a pure lip roaring arse. You know what I mean?
The Celtic board making a rip roaring arse. Well, I never. So guys, we'll move on to this segment. The first one, as I said, this is going to be an education for me. This one, because I don't have any real vivid memories of this. So I'll put it to basically always at the same time if you want to chip in with anything here. So I've said red flags. So what were the sort of earliest indications in this timeline that all was not well at Celtic? Was there anything that stood out right away to any of you personally, or was it just like common knowledge that things are going pretty pear-shaped at Celtic? What was the first real watershed moment?
I thought it was a watershed moment, but you just said there a minute ago about how we didn't strengthen from a position of strength when after we'd won the centenary double. We signed 2 players during the transfers during the summer. We signed Ian Andrews and Alan Ruff.
Oh God!
that was our summer strengthening. We did add Tommy Coyne, because I believe it's before the transfer window were introduced. We did sign Tommy Coyne, and we did sign somebody else. I can't think who it was now. But that was our summer strengthening. So when you looked at that, you thought, that's us strengthening our team. We've signed a guy who turned out to be one of the worst goalkeepers we ever had, in Ian Andrews. He was he lost 5 to Rangers on his Ibrox and his Rangers debut, or his Celtic debut rather than Ibrox. Ray Wilkins sent a screamer past him, and there's a few more that went past him, right? But the other one was Alan Ruff, a backup goalkeeper who came from, we got him on a free from one, can't remember who it was. Was it Orlando? I think it was, somewhere in America, I think it was. But so that's got a little bell sort of starting to ring. You start thinking, why are we not? We need to strengthen the team, but we didn't. So I wouldn't say it was a red flag as such, but it was certainly an early warning signal.
Well, one of the things I've heard over the years from like relatives and that, they talk about the Paul Elliott contract situation, like people that I've known and they were following Celtic at the time. Apparently there was a real fiasco with that because he was an absolute luxury player that Celtic managed to get during that era. Apparently we just made a mess of it when it came to renegotiating his deal, and we had to basically let him go. It was at Chelsea he went away to in the end, but do you remember anything about that? Like that being a significant moment where you're like, oh God, we had to let Paul Elliott go. Like that's huge.
Well, for me anyway, it was a huge moment when we lost him because he was a main man, but I wasn't aware of. I can't remember anyway being aware of any contract situation with him. To be fair, but if that's the stories that I don't remember himself. I don't know about Liam.
It's an incompetent board, to be honest with you. You guys like Tom Grant and Jim Farrell and these sort of guys who know too much clue about football at all. You know what I mean? The board was littered with guys that are just had no acumen for where they were, and it was surprising it took so long to get rid of half of them. And it makes no surprise when you've got a board of businessmen that with no football experience that things like that happen. When you've got guys who aren't football savvy, these things slip through the net. You know what I mean? And they don't know how to deal with football transfers, negotiations of contracts. Like it's a bit more professional nowadays, where there's lawyers and like Michael Nicholson's old job was seeing the legal sides of contracts. That's you get somebody solely focused on players' contract renewals and incomings and outgoings. That these things tend to happen less and less, but back then, the board was just made up basically of like nepotism. You had the dynasty of the 2 Kellys and the White, and and that was the aim, you know, they control the club from start to finish, you know what I mean, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. And I think when you're asking for like red flags, I think the red flags was a Taylor report and Celtic's decision to renovate the jungle rather than look to demolish part of the stadium and rebuild it. That was a red flag for anybody alive at that era, I'm pretty sure. And you talk about Celtic at that point were a financially stable club, and they'd been posting profits, small profits, and they had a decent overdraft facility.
Yep.
And the red flag must have been raised when the team on the park wasn't getting invested in. But also, the Taylor report was a major issue for clubs the size of Celtic, with the stadiums holding 60,000, and the decision was made to demolish the most iconic part of the stadium and replace it with a. I don't know if you remember, Phil. It was like a wee stand that just had Celtic and a wee 4-leaf colour on it.
Yep.
I still remember the newspaper headlines with a picture of it all mocked up. As young as I was back then, I can still remember it, and it just didn't even seem like a good idea thinking back, you know. And there must have been questions raised even within the media who didn't really raise concerns really as such, but the red flags were all over the place very early, I feel.
Right. Now, Liam, you were stateside at this point in time during the sort of late 80s into the early 90s. So how did you get like the news and that regarding Celtic and get to see the games? And could you see a deterioration even from over that side of the pond, that things were going rapidly downhill for Celtic?
I mean, you always got that from people that came back that had just been on holiday. So you always knew somebody that was coming back. First thing everybody did back then when they came back was bring all the papers with them. So, you know, you play football on a Sunday morning, somebody bring all the papers, and you'd go through the last week's, and that's what you'd see. The stuff is uploading anything in. Didn't have that. There was some internet going on at the time, and that was like there was a Usenet group called North American Tims, the NA Tims list.
Right.
And you used to get information off that, and that's when you would get guys that would go deep. That's sort of like, you know, it was the precursor to like Celtic Minded or the Huddle Board or Kerrydale Street and that. And so there was the NA Tims list was good because that's where you found out all the information. It's also how you found out where to go and watch Celtic when you were in. To work between Toronto, Montreal, and New York back then. And so I was getting perspectives and information for all three. But they also, when they started the Celts for Change as well, Toronto was one of the places. I remember being in McVeigh's, which then became a Celtic club. It's the downtown Toronto CSC right now. Before it was that, Matt McGlone was in there. And the people that had come over that wanted to tell supporters groups and that what's going on. There's still a lot of big supporters groups back then, and it was more a social thing. You go on a Saturday in Toronto, it'd be like 1,000 people, you know, socialising and talking about that. So, there was rumours of rifts and all that. But, you know, people are just more interested in the scores half the time. You had to sit down with somebody that was really knowledgeable to go through it. It wasn't on the surface. People just happened to connect and hearing the scores and hearing about Celtic.
It's weird to think as well. There was a time, folks, for all the younger viewers watching, you know, the Ryan Kellys, that's all. There was a time for the internet where we couldn't just click something and just get a quick update on that. No, this is what you had to do. This was a proper, you know, back in the day, having to get your news, actual newspapers, people flying across the country or flying across the world, coming back to tell you what was happening at Celtic. But it sounds like it was you know, it's been mental back then. Just like, you know, get your news that way. So I can't even remember a time before that. Even though I'm 36 now, I'm that ingrained now in technology and the internet and stuff like that. I can't even remember it myself. But one thing I was going to bring up, guys, was obviously the Whites and the Kellys. You know, they talked about they were names synonymous at the top of Celtic for years and years. It does baffle me when you look at the years of success that they oversaw, that they were just kind of allowing this to happen. But was it just a case of Rangers were just spending so recklessly, there was nothing we could do to stop it? But were Celtic doing sensible business, but it's just because Rangers were just so, you know, indulged in it, just doing so much that it was just like, doesn't matter what we do. They're just, or was it a case of Celtic were just, their scouting was terrible, everything was terrible? Because this is when the term biscuit tin was obviously coined.
Sorry, Mark, couldn't you go? But
well, I think it was called the biscuit tin dynasty. Actually, I think that was the name given to it. But no, I think the Well, Michael Kelly didn't come onto the board till 1990, so
Right.
Kevin Kelly did a good job at Celtic, and so did Chris White. You know what I mean? They did good jobs up until a certain point. But
Yeah.
what happened was, just reading back, what's happened is, what happened at Rangers, they took advantage with the cash influx of David Murray. We all know it turns out it wasn't all kosher. Celtic didn't fall too far behind. Rangers just pulled away, to be honest with you, mate. And Celtic, we had a board that, as I just said, it was called the Biscuit Tin Dynasty, and they weren't going to spend money they didn't have, or at least get themselves into, don't laugh out loud, get themselves into financial crisis just yet to keep up with Rangers. And they probably thought it was a flash in the pan moment for Rangers, but it just so happened that the 5-year ban for English clubs, and Graham Souness had a big pool. He played in England, and he had Terry Butcher, Chris Woods, Trevor Stevens, all these guys, Trevor Francis. These guys were household names, coming to Rangers. And Celtic it's not that Celtic had the Biscuit Tin sealed firmly. They just couldn't compete with that. It was by any measure reckless spending by Rangers. You know what I mean? And it turned out that's exactly what it was. And I don't think just at this moment, is the area talking about, the Celtic board could be accused of lack of ambition or falling asleep at the wheel. That came a wee bit later, I think.
Yeah, definitely did. Now, here's one as well. See, when Billy McNeill left in 91 and was replaced with Liam Brady, how was that treated? Because obviously a comparison you can draw is John Barnes getting appointed in 99, a former player. This is his first big stint in management, a good player when he played. Did Liam Brady bring a lot of excitement, or was things getting so bad between the fans and the board that it was kind of met with a bit of apathy, or was there a general, yes, this is what we need, this is good? I remember when Barnes got appointed after the Rangers had won the treble the year before, and with Kenny Dalglish by his side, you're like, this is the dream team that we need to take us to the next level. And obviously that just fell apart. So how was Liam Brady greeted when he joined in 91?
Thinking back, I think it was probably greeted with some measure of, if not excitement, then bear in mind the man he'd replaced. I mean, he replaced Billy McNeill, which was a bit acrimonious anyway. We haven't mentioned a certain Mr. Terry Cassidy as yet, but he was probably not a favourite. But I suppose there must have been some form of excitement and thinking, a comparison, not so much with John Barnes, but Rangers had done it with Souness. They brought Souness in, no managerial skills, but he came in as a player manager. And although he'd never played in Scotland, Souness had a knowledge of some form of knowledge of Scotland and Scottish football and Rangers. Just possibly, he'd never played here, obviously. Went down to Spurs as a youngster and then on to Middlesbrough and whatnot. But he had an idea of what he was walking into. Liam Brady didn't, and by his own admission, later on, admitted he had really no idea what he was walking into. Two of the things that were, when you talked about red flags with Brady was, one of them was, he conceded the title, I think, round about Christmas in his first year. Now, we might have been realistically thinking, we're not going to win this league, but the last thing we wanted to hear was our manager come out and say, no, I don't think we can win the title. Not when it was still mathematically possible, and certainly not round about Christmas. So I think initially it was probably, this might be, this could be good, but I don't remember it being over the top, if I'm being honest, Phil. I don't.
Yeah. What about yourselves, Liam and Mark? Either of you remember any of the Liam Brady hysteria, if it was even a thing?
I think.
Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just saying that before my time, Liam, I think you're best to answer that question, mate.
I was looking forward to it. I thought it was a like for like. I thought it was, as John said, going to be like Souness. You got a player that came in that had international experience. He'd played in Italy, and I was like, okay, well, Billy McNeill, ex-captain player, and I thought maybe that was the route. You could see that was a trend developing back then, that players that had played at a high level of the game were all becoming managers, and especially ones with European connections, because that was going to open up, but it did as well. And I was excited. I thought it was going to be a really good thing.
Well, well, what we'll do then, because we're coming up to roughly the hour mark, usually when we hit about an hour, we will just put in a wee quick 2-minute musical interlude before we get invested, because obviously we've got to talk about some of the on the park moments as well. So that's going to be quite lopsided, I think, in terms of bad stuff. And then we've obviously going to be talking about the stadium farce. Canvas Lang is a reality, apparently. There's a scary thought. And yeah, we'll obviously be looking at the McCann takeover coming up as well. So what I'll do is I will tee up the music just now, and we will be back in a couple of minutes, folks.
Some of his comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.
Alrighty, we're back. Sorry I cut it a bit short there. Boise told me a little interesting fact. The end credits, if you play the full 2 minutes 42 seconds, apparently YouTube gives the video a copyright strike, even though Boise's got the rights to use the music. It is only on the ending credits one if you play the full thing. So I have to cut it a wee bit short so it doesn't get a copyright strike on it. How weird is that? YouTube works in very, very strange ways. I don't know. So yeah, that's a little interesting behind the scenes fact, folks. There you go. But yeah, we'll move on now to talking about. Oh, okay. Now it's going to get really grim because we talk about on the park. As I say, it's been deteriorating pretty rapidly. So yeah, Celtic, as I say, transfer wise, it's not going too well. Everything's starting to fall apart. Rangers are just absolutely flexing their financial muscle. And yeah, on the park, we just can't get anywhere near them. We're actually finishing like 3rd and 4th and stuff like that in the league table as well. So yeah, absolute period of decline. And it's synonymous for such names as Cascarino, Muggleton, Slater, Gillespie, Payton. These are the type of names that are associated with this era of Celtic in terms of players we brought in. We also had to rely on bringing on old players coming back for second spells like Charlie Nicholas, McAvenny, Andy Walker, who just couldn't really get back up to the sort of heights that they achieved in their first spell. Probably the only real plus points I'd say is McStay and Collins, guys. Would that be a safe assumption to say that they are the two only real shining lights in the whole team?
Yeah, without a doubt, yeah.
Aye, and a lot of people also talk about Jerry Craney as well, and Tommy Coyne were relatively decent. By Collins and McStay, you just look at it, you look at any team sheet from that era, and it's like, aye, they are far and above the absolutely far and away much better. But yeah, in terms of like on the park, so the decade starts with Rangers winning the title in 1990. However, Celtic have got a chance to make it 3 Scottish Cups in a row. But sensationally, they draw 0-0 with Aberdeen in the final and then lose a penalty shootout 9-8. Anton Rogan missed the deciding penalty in the end. But Yeah, this would just set the tone of things to come. Say what an obscene scoreline and penalties. Didn't we have one like that against Dundee United in like 2009 when Boric had to take a penalty and it was an absolute raspberry a penalty as well?
It was a great goal, and I think it was Zaliska that was in goals that day. And I think
it was
the game you're talking about. I'm sure Charlie Nicholas scored the winning penalty, but he already knew that he was coming to Celtic.
Oh my God!
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. But when you were telling your story about when you were on the flight and you had to miss the end of the Invincible final,
yeah,
I was watching that game on the internet. Penalty shootout. Boric is coming up, just getting ready to start his run up, and the internet froze, went down. It took me 10 minutes to get it back up. I had no idea what the score was or whether he'd scored it or whatever. Like it was.
But that happened to me with Chris Ayers penalty. See, I was watching on Premier Sports, like a bona fide Premier Sports customer. There wasn't a link, and Chris Ayers stepped up, and my wife would tell you, and he went to hit the ball, and my screen just went black. And then within about maybe 3-4 seconds, I just see Chris Ayers run away. Didn't see the penalty itself, but at that point, you don't really care. You just realise that you've won. But to miss two trebles, one on a fucking stupid flight, and one because of Premier Sports, I'll never forgive myself. And the other one was ruined by Neil Lennon, but the other one I quite enjoyed. But
there's Patrick McLaughlin saying it was Brian Irvine that scored the winning penalty, but I did look it up on Wiki. Nicholas does score one of Aberdeen's penalties, and amongst that ridiculous 9-8. I've seen you hardly ever see that at all.
I thought he scored the winning. I did know he scored for a fact because I've seen the penalty before, but I did think he scored the winning one. But just because I heard the story about how he knew he was already gone back, and he was like kind of. He had a job to do. He's like, well, I'm an Aberdeen player for this last kick of the ball anyway, and he knew he was going back, and he had like kind of mixed emotions, kind of walking away from it. But he came back, and it was a fraction player, and McAvenny was the same. Andy Walker was the same. But some bright sparks, you know. When Tom Boyd came into that team, Tom Boyd was actually a really good football player for Celtic. You know, I mean, people that saw the latter part of his career didn't realise just how good a job Tom Boyd did for us. You know what I mean? And we had guys like John Collins. He could have probably fitted into any Celtic team of any era. That guy was just utter class. You know what I mean? He was a phenomenal player. He was actually. I'd probably say that him leaving Celtic devastated me more than Paul McStay retiring or anything like that. It was a really sore one to take. Probably the first sore one I took as a Celtic fan is losing a player was losing Collins. I think it was Monaco.
First Bosman out of Scottish football.
Bosman, wasn't it? Yeah.
He was. End of the 96 season. But yeah, you mentioned Tom Boyd there. That's a good link there because he's about to feature here. Because a year later, 1991, again, Rangers walk away with the title. Celtic are nowhere near them, can't lay a glove. But interestingly enough, we did beat them in the Scottish Cup along the way. The very infamous St. Patrick's Day massacre. Is this the game when Graham Souness kicks the door in at Celtic Park? I've heard the story about.
Is that not Terry Butcher?
Terry Butcher. That's the one. Is it when Neil's getting interviewed or something like that, and it happens behind him or something on live TV?
Or just crashes open, and then the next day in the papers they're showing you the photographs of the hole in the door where Butcher had put his foot through it, or whatever.
Oh God!
You Jack Charlton sitting in the studio and a big smile on his face. It was superb.
Because the footage of it's on YouTube and stuff like that. I have watched that a few times. It looked epic, that one. But the St. Patrick's Day massacre, it was known as the Scottish Cup. I think it was at the quarterfinals or the last 16. But yeah, we dumped Rangers at the Cup. But typical Celtic fashion this era is one step forward and two steps back the way, because we would come up against Motherwell in the semi-final. Even though Tom Boyd scored an OG that day for Motherwell, because he was a Motherwell player at the time, we still managed to lose 4-2. Motherwell would go on and win the Cup. So again, typical Celtic of this era. They do the hard work of beating Rangers and then get dumped out by Motherwell, and it's like, oh, for fuck's sake. And then 1992, we move on to there. Again, similar story in the league, absolutely nowhere near it. We do, however, get to the semi-finals of the Scottish Cup again. And we're going to talk about something that we talked about last night, Mark, something that we love to talk about on Celtic Podcast, referees. This is an infamous game we play against Rangers, and it is also the perfect microcosm of Celtic Rangers fixtures at this time, because Celtic are the team in the ascendancy. Celtic are pretty much dominating it, right? David Robertson gets sent off after 5 minutes in this game by referee Andrew Waddle, right? Sends him off. It was like a shoulder barge. I think he caught like McStay or Collins, a shoulder barge, but he's ended up sent off because the commentator says, oh, he's going to book him here, and shockingly sends him off. So that's after like 6 or 7 minutes. And Celtic are all over Rangers, and of course, Gorham saving everything, can't get a breakthrough. Ali McCoist puts Rangers 1-0 up just before half-time. In the second half, again, lots of great saves from Gorham. Brian and Neil hits the post. Paul McStay hits the crossbar. And then we get denied one of the most ludicrous penalty claims I've ever seen, where John Brown gets completely wrong-footed by a quick turn by John Collins and takes him down. It's also remembered how muddy the pitch was. It was soaked that night at Hampden, and from stories that I've read, because at Hampden at that point, they hadn't put a roof on the Celtic end yet. So the Celtic end, you were absolutely soaked, and they had a roof at the Rangers end. But this penalty decision, how he's no giving it, is absurd, and they go on to beat us 1-0. But it's a bonkers decision.
You look at John Collins' face right after that. He just kind of like still on his knees and just turns around and just kind of looks at the referee and just waiting for the whistle to go. And it's a shocking decision, you know what I mean? And it's just one of the many that happened in that era, and to be fair, just now still, you know what I mean? But it was more blatant back then, to be quite honest with you, mate, because it was just kind of accepted by Celtic fans that when you played against Rangers that you're going to get a few shockers, and you just have to beat the 11 men, but beat the referee as well.
And Liam, as I said there, like, it was like the absolute microcosm of Celtic Rangers fixtures at the time. You know, battered them off the park, Gorham pulling off save after save, and McCoist with score. I think the old analogy used to be Rangers could literally just field Gorham and McCoist against us, and they would still beat us in their games. But yeah, you must have a few memories about some of the fixtures then, because they seem to follow a similar pattern where Celtic have got all the chances, but we just can't put them away. It's always a hard luck story.
It's always been that. I mean, that was us this weekend as well. I mean, the chances were still. It's always been our club, which means it's good. We make lots of chances. One of the things that stands out for me back at that era, Phil, though, is I think we could still beat them in any day, despite the international players and all that. The disparity that suggests, right? So, you know, I think that was like there was. We were beating them out of cups. We were beating them, and that, you know, any time just men against men, our 11 could outdo theirs. So I never went into games thinking, "Oh, we're going to get battered here." A wee bit later on, I did. There was other Rangers teams, but at that point, no, I was still watched Celtic. I felt we could win any time we played against them. That wasn't that going in with like, "Oh, they don't think we'll do the day." It was always 3-0. You know.
Well, there's Patrick McLaughlin saying there was a spell we went 3 years unbeaten against them at Ibrox between 93 and 96. I'm pretty sure there was a game where Brian and Neil scored like a stoppage time winner. The famous story for that is Brady had been sacked, but McCarry hadn't taken over, and was it Frank Connor had stepped in as interim manager, or McCarry had just taken over? But yeah, it was like a John Collins scored. It was Ali Maxwell spills it at his feet. And then Brian and Neil, of all people, pops up as stoppage time to beat them, because I did have that in my notes. When you look back on some of the performances, what Liam says is true. You did still feel that Celtic could get a result, despite the clear gulf in class between both teams. Look at Rangers a few years ago when they came up for the lower divisions, right? The shambles that they were. We were putting 5 goals past them at Ibrox and beating them 5-1 at home, 4-0 in a Scottish Cup semi-final. We never, ever shipped 5 goals at home to them, despite how bad we were at times. We never had a game where they turned up and beat us like 5-0 or 5-1 at Celtic Park or anything like that. It was like we still had a wee bit about us. And they say the one from a couple of seasons before this, we beat them in the Scottish Cup, the St. Patrick's Day Massacre, and then in typical fashion, we do the hard work, and then we get beat by a team that we should be beating in Motherwell. So it was just I
think they did one time. I remember a New Year's match one time, and they were 3-0 up at Celtic Park within about 10 minutes or something. So they were, I think they beat us 4-1 that day. But I agree, Celtic used to pepper their goal for 80 minutes maybe, and Rangers would break up the park and score. So it was a bit of a trope, people pull out, but it's the fact of the matter, anybody cares to watch the highlights of these matches, and you'll see Celtic having chance after chance. But Rangers had probably the best goalkeeper that's probably ever played in Scotland, in my opinion, Andy Gorham, and he was just it kills me to say it, but the guy was probably one of the best goalkeepers probably that's ever lived, to be quite honest with you. The guy just, anytime Celtic played Rangers, the guy just grew an extra set of arms and an extra set of legs. You know, the guy was just always popping up, and Do you know? And you can't argue with that. That's his job. But Celtic just found it hard to get past him. And it was, even when you were cheering goals, even in the mid-90s, you were cheering goals. It was almost like relief that they managed to get the ball past him. You know what I mean? It was
Aye.
even I remember the 6-2 game. This is many years later.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe Celtic had scored 3 goals in 10 minutes against Rangers, because goals were very few and far between against them. I mean, I remember in that year we did have a really good record at Ibrox. I remember that Paul Byrne, scored a cracking volley.
He did. It was a volley. John Collins pings that across him. Aye.
It's a beautiful goal. An absolute top of the goal. And I didn't realise it was as much as 3 years. That must be including. Does that include? Was Collins' free kick? Was that 92 or was that 93? Remember the free
that
kick
was 93 or 94. Right. That was because the kit is.
Yeah, we were wearing the really thick banded hoops.
Yes.
I can't remember what year it was though. Yeah.
Kits, that's it. I think that was the match the Celtic fans get banned. The David Murray banned the Celtic fans because of trouble at the previous match. And there was like a couple hundred Celtic fans similarly in the stadium, but. I didn't realise it was as much as 3 years, but I do always remember like the narrative being that Celtic had a good record at Ibrox, and once they broke that, Celtic went, I think, 7 years without winning a game at Ibrox, right up until the 3-0 game at Ibrox 2000 when Larsson got his 50th goal. So once they broke that, what's that?
We'll be back in 2 minutes.
John will be back in a couple of minutes. No worries.
He's going to get a coffee. This might take a while. But that was an actually on paper. There's a lot of players that you might not recognise as Celtic greats, but Liam, that was a good team to watch, wasn't it?
Aye, it was a good team. I like Paul Byrne, by the way. I thought Paul Byrne was a cracking player.
The goal he scores at Ibrox, that volley, as I say, John Collins pings it absolutely perfectly to him, and he just beats it brilliantly, a nice volley, and just goes in at the back post. It's a cracker. But it was, I think Patrick McLaughlin put it in here. It was the New Year game in '95. That was so it would have been Tommy Burns in charge at the time. But it was a good goal, that one. The John Cena's your back, mate, and you were obviously frequenting Celtic Park around about the time of the late '80s, '90s. We're going to talk about Europe, and I'm going to say 2 words that strike fear. Yes, Partizan Belgrade. It's almost like you read my mind, mate. But yeah, were you at the Partizan Belgrade game at all?
I was, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest with you, it was, despite the end result was, although we won the game and we gone out, it was probably, as daft as it sounds, it was one of the best games of football that I'd ever actually that I was at. It was it was just mental.
It was Jakinovsky was it 4? He scored 5 that night.
He scored 5.
He scored.
I thought Andy Walker scored.
He scored 4. Walker scored.
Aye.
Yeah. It was because especially we were 2-1 down from the first leg, and I think we lost the first goal in very early on in the game, if I remember rightly. Now it was they scored early on, and you think, for fuck's sake, like that's us, because. Their away goal cancelled out ours, but then it was just mental. It was ridiculous. But what was really mental about it is we were through. Now, my memory serves me, and somebody else who's watching can tell me I'm wrong, but we were through. We were in the last 2 minutes, something like that, and we're attacking. I think we get a throw in or something. And all we got to do is, as Boyce is saying, play smart, be cynical, be streetwise,
Yes.
But no, we've got to try and push and get this other goal. Took the quick throw in, tried to get the attack, it broke down. They were at the park and scored. And I just remember it. I was in the Celtic end. I wasn't in the jungle that night, and we're just standing. What the fuck has just happened?
Yeah.
The game is pretty much done and dusted. We're going through, and we blew it. And I just remember it was walking out of the stadium. It was just, it was just weird. And the bus journey back, you're just thinking. But what I didn't know, apparently the guy who scored the goal that put us out, his son signed for Celtic.
I'm going to think his name for about a minute and a half now. It's like Chev at the end, isn't it? Oh. Let me try to think his name.
Okay.
I'm hearing the commentator say it, and I just can't remember his name.
He didn't. His lad signed for us, but he never done nothing for us. Like
Okay.
Skepovic.
Was it Skepovic?
Yeah.
Oh my word!
Apparently, his son is the same Skepovic.
Patrick McLaughlin's saying that, and he's but yeah, start.
Really?
Skepovic? Wow. Because I mean, it must be a weird feeling though.
That was a. You know, if you were a neutral at that game, you hear about people who become Celtic supporters because they went along to a game and they watched that game, and ever since then they were Celtic. Well, if we'd had any neutrals, they'd have been Celtic supporters from then on. But it was just crazy mental the way we had it in our hands and just.
I think they were through twice, John. I think Celtic were through twice. I think Celtic were through in that tie twice. See, with the scoreline, I'm pretty sure they were through twice. I think it went 4-2, then 5-3.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then it went to 5-4, which meant we were out because they won the home leg. I think we were through twice. I'm pretty sure.
Patrick McLaughlin also reckons that Golak was a Partizan manager who was a Dundee United manager, I think, in the mid-90s.
I think he's right, actually, yeah.
Ivan
Golak,
who stopped Rangers for winning a double treble with the Craig Brewster Cup final, that one, where he scored for Dundee United. It was... But it must be a weird feeling, though, John, walking away from a game. You've just watched your team score 5 goals in the game, and you still haven't gone through, because it ended 6-6 on aggregate. And Partizan were through on away goals. Absurd.
The one you felt really sorry was Jackie, wasn't it? You know, I've just scored 4 goals, and it was the manner of it at the end. We were through. We're in the last minute. We've got the ball. All we've got to do is throw it in the corner, keep it there. Mm-hmm. But no, they had to go for and try and get another goal, and we didn't even need another goal, But. Hey, Hill, but the bus journey back to, because I lived in Glenrothes at that time. The bus journey, we were just everybody just sitting there shaking their heads saying,
"Can't believe it!
What the fuck?" Like, yeah.
Oh wow! Because that was the 1990 season, 89-90 season. So we were out in the Cup Winners' Cup there. So the next one is a very, very infamous one, though, in Celtic history. Again, Partizan Belgrade was infamous, and this one was just as bad, but for different reasons. So Celtic went in Europe in 1991, but in the 91-92 season, in a return to the UEFA Cup, we were knocked out by lowly Swiss side. I'm going to pronounce this right. Nautical Zamax was how that was pronounced. We lost 5-1 in the first leg and beat them 1-0 in the second leg, losing 5-2 or aggregate. Guys, do any of you even... I suppose you want to erase it for your mind, but yeah, Jesus Christ, I've never even heard of this team, and they've never done anything of any notoriety, I think, since then. But Jesus, that must be a shock to the system, that one.
I just know the game. I've obviously too young to remember that, but I know the game, and you see their name pop up in trivia questions, and just that Zama X-A-M-A-X.
It is indeed.
It's a weird name, and the one you forget. I actually thought the first leg was 5-0. Was it 5-1? We must have got a lucky goal, but I know
we went out 5-2 in aggregate. Yeah.
That's a black mark. You know, I heard Stephen Craigan say that Motherwell's got a black mark on their European history by going out to Sligo. I mean, I didn't realise Motherwell had a European history with a black mark against it, but the fact that Celtic getting out against a team like that, that's right up there with Progress Niederkorn stuff, isn't it?
We used to watch the games in Toronto at that point, and there was a guy that used to work the door to collect the money for Satanta. And I was one of them, right? And he used to always wear one of their T-shirts. Every European game, he'd try and go and find and buy an obscure T-shirt of somebody that had knocked us early doors, And that was it. So it's like, so I knew that name at the time because I always seen this wee prick wearing the T-shirt,
Jesus. Oh man, Zamax. That's a name that will unfortunately be ever linked to us for one of our clanger results along with, to a degree, something like Lincoln Red Imps and Media Bratislava and stuff like that. Zamax is another one. But the 92-93 season is probably the only European highlight that Celtic have in this entire period. In the UEFA Cup, they get through the first round after losing 2-0. In Cologne, they come back to Glasgow, and on a quite magical night, they win 3-0 to dump the Bundesliga side out. I believe Collins, McStay, and Jerry Craney were the goal scorers. I've watched the highlights quite a few times. The John Collins one, I always remember watching the highlights where, because he jumps over the advertising hoardings right after it to run to celebrate to the crowd. Because this was at a time when Celtic Park was not right on top of the players. There was like a big gap behind the goal right over to the crowd. But I remember him scoring and then he leaps over the barrier and runs over to the fans. But yeah, this is literally the only highlight of the European stuff in the early 90s. But do you remember that one at all with against Cologne being 2-0 down that you go and win it 3-2 in the end?
I saw the game, mate, but I've not got any particular.
I don't as it happens. No, not that one. No, I don't. I think it was about the time that I was starting to lose the will to live. I think a little bit.
Don't blame you.
I mean, it was one of those. You had, young married man, a young family. You've got to, it got to the stage where I've got disposable income, but I'm not spending it over there. I'm just not wasting it anymore.
Stephen Colfart saying he was in Cologne for his first ever European away trip. Went by bus and took him 2 days to get there. My God. But that would have been some adventure.
Was it a wind-up bus?
That's a hell of a long time for a bus.
They got the Bustalgia, they got there quicker.
Could have got on the time travelling bus. Could have got him right there. But yeah, in terms of European stuff, say 93-94 season, we got past the Young Boys of Bern in the first round, the Swiss side, only lose to Sporting Lisbon in the next round. So yeah, that was much after we beat Cologne as well, but another German team played us. We got knocked out by Borussia Dortmund. So that was Europe in the early 90s and other stuff on the park. But off the park, guys, we did actually have a success. I mentioned at the start of the show, we did win the 10-6s in 1992. And what's the 10-6s? I can hear the youngsters crying from the back. So see Masters football that you see nowadays, where you get like, a five-a-side game inside and it's like legends of the club playing. Basically, from the mid-80s to the early 90s, Tenants and the SFA had this tournament, but it wasn't legends or anything. It was actual first-team players were playing in the 10-6s. The Celtic won it in 1982. It's literally the only silverware they picked up. Although, Liam, you told us before we came on air that you did watch Celtic win a pre-season cup in Hamilton, Ontario.
Aye, 1994. It was fun.
There you go.
It was 3 Scottish teams and a team from Montreal, and it was in Iverwin Stadium in Hamilton. The John Dean CSC out there. It was brilliant. It was like Hearts, Aberdeen, and Montreal Rapid, I think was the 3 teams we were playing against. We beat Hearts in the first game, and then we got Aberdeen in the final, and we were talking early. John, was it Paul Byrne? Paul Byrne scored.
Paul Byrne.
But I remember the day, everybody was really excited. The boy came on for 2 substitute appearances in Hamilton, and he was ripping it apart up and down the wing. That was a Brian Lockman back then.
Okay, so there you go, folks. We didn't just win the 10-6, we've also won the Hamilton Cup as well, in Hamilton, Ontario.
I read about that game the other day there, Liam. I read about I knew it got to Aberdeen next. I read about the final just the other day there, but it popped up on Twitter. And in fact, I think it was a Celtic history page on Twitter. I'll just show you random pictures, and one was from the final. And was it played on an AstroTurf pitch? Was it?
Oh, and it was brutal. I've played on that park before, and it's carpet.
That's the pitch I seen.
They give,
It looked like it would be better off in a. What was that? Fresh and Vac? It looks like it belonged to a Fresh and Vac advert. You know what I mean? And I don't really think at all of it. Well, we're going to give you some of these answers to that.
I'm not, mate. You notice I'm
on?
keeping very stum. I'll give you the answers at the end. But yeah, I mentioned 10-6s there. That's all I'm saying about it. We won the 10-6s. I'm keeping very
10. Did you say
10? There's 10. So 10 players were obviously
one,
used, but only 6 could be on the. I don't think it's a park. What would you call it? A court. This one time. But yeah, it was played in the SECC. And Celtic won it once out of the few years that it was running, but that was actually the only sort of silverware that the first team, lifted.
Bring it back and use the B team. That'd be good. Bring it back during the first month of June. Use the B team. Stephen
Coltart reckons he's got 8 of them already. Usually quite good at getting the quiz answers. But yeah, as I said at the start, I went back to the Celtic wiki that I used last week for the Dutch players one, and that was wrong. So it better be right this time, honestly. It better be bloody right. show me up here. But anyway, we'll move on to the
The
next
thing is,
topic.
the wiki, anybody can change that, Phil. See, I can go on the
Yeah.
wiki and change that myself. So
Should,
it's not always the most bona
No.
fide information. I seen one Celtic were looking for a player and it said that he'd played for an IRA Select.
Yeah, that's true. Anyone can edit it, man. They've got the power. So I'm playing with fire here doing this. But yeah, we'll move on to the next part. So obviously the stadium is at the root of many of the problems in terms of what would come with the takeover and so forth. So the stadium farce. So it's safe to say in the early 90s, Celtic Park was maybe starting to show its age, or maybe some people would say it still had a bit of character, especially when you look across the city at what Rangers were doing with Ibrox. They'd knocked it all down and rebuilt it, and it was an all-seater stadium. In fact, I think it may even be the first all-seater stadium in the UK at that point as well, and this is before the Taylor report had even happened and the Hillsborough tragedy had happened. They'd moved to an all-seater stadium. But yeah, Celtic Park was kind of starting to look a wee bit dilapidated. I think even Fergus McCann described it as, when you looked at it, it was quite uneven, just the way it wasn't very symmetrical, basically. But yeah, following the Hillsborough tragedy in 1989, the Taylor report demanded that all top-flight clubs move towards all-seater stadia by August 1994. So what was you guys like feeling on Celtic Park, though, looking at it before the changes, in terms of like knocking it, before McCann had even taken over? How did you feel when you did go and did look at it? Did you think, yeah, that this could use a wee lick of paint or two? Or were you just like, no, it's got character, this is our home, at the end of the day, this is nothing wrong with it?
Mm-hmm.
It was a dump, but it was our dump.
There you go. That's the best way of putting
That's what I
it.
was going to say. I mean, what we got to realise is, no matter what era it's in, like Celtic fans and Rangers fans, any support, like, you look at the stadium, they see, all they see is the history, the players that played in that park, the memories of watching Celtic play with their dad, their brothers, people who've maybe passed away. So it's probably been a lot of teary nostalgia for folk. But at the end of the day, I mean, we've all seen videos and pictures of the state. It was a nick, I mean, I had to go. And the Taylor report, it was bred out of something that was a disaster, and a lot of folk lost their lives. But it made football safer for fans. And the days of the youngsters just being passed out in the front of the terrace to stand, while their dads were at the back of the terrace with their cans of lager and that, and Celtic scoring and these young boys getting crushed. They just had to stop, mate. You know what I mean? And I think anybody that was attending matches back then, I mean, I wasn't fortunate enough to go to matches and that a lot back then. So anybody that's attending matches back then must have seen the merits in it. Although, is even when you take an old shitty car to the scrapyard, I mean, there's a wee tear in your eye because it's got a lot of memories in it. Now, I mean, going to a stadium that you've probably been watching a team play for 30, 40 years. I mean, this is the same blade of grass that people watch Jock's team Celtic playing, and that was going to be taken away from them. So there must have been traditionalists that didn't want it, but it just comes a time where you just need to throw that old jump on the bin and get a new one, mate. You know what I mean?
Do indeed. So out of nowhere, April 1992, the 1167th edition of the Celtic View, the board drops an absolute bombshell announcement. Celtic Park would be no more. They unveiled plans for a brand new stadium in Cambuslang. They were actually wanting to take Celtic away from their spiritual home of Parkhead and move to a site in Cambuslang. I also believe a site in Rob Royston was also earmarked as well, where the Asda Rob Royston is now in the Nova Business Park, which isn't too far away from me because I'm in Bishop Briggs, so I'm not too far away from it. But yeah, Cambuslang ultimately was what they deemed to go with. The Celtic View was littered with all sorts of patronising headlines like Paradise Found and the world's best stadium for the world's best fans. Pictures of Kevin Kelly, the chairman, standing on the ground with his arms out like that. And yeah, it was... that's right, the shovel. That's right. There's a picture of that as well. But yeah, it was coming from a board who by this point definitely weren't in the good books of Celtic fans. Highlights of this new mega structure that was going to be built would be a 52,000 all-seater stadium. It'd have park and ride train stations linking to Glasgow city centre, be a retail village including major stores and car showrooms, parking facilities for over 4,000 cars, a museum we're still waiting on the museum at the new stadium. Sport and leisure facilities on the site, and a lot more. It sounded too good to be true, but as the saying goes, gentlemen, when it is too good to be true, it often is the case. It's too good to be true because something's going to go wrong here. So, guys, what was your first reaction then when it was like, was you excited? Were you actually going to embrace it? Or was it a case of, no, you can't take us away from Parkhead. This is like our spiritual home. Can't you do it?
I'm from the East End of Glasgow, living in Canada. Where the fuck's Compass Land?
Oh.
No idea.
It was filled with there was a civil engineer looked at it, and it was, they had like big holes under the ground with unfilled landmines and everything. It was like, it was deemed unsafe to even stand on them and build a stadium on. And Celtic, I think Celtic held a press conference and got a civil engineer to say it was safe. I think they had their hand up the back of his jumper, but even if you look back at the press conference when they announced that, I could just still see David Smith standing there with his hand, and Kevin Kelly just nodding like a dog where he was saying it was a reality and the Celtic fans were to trust this. I mean, Brian Dempsey is a figure that's revered in Celtic support, and the guy deserves a lot of credit for being the one to broker the deal that got Fergus McCann at Celtic Park. But Brian Dempsey was the first one to propose Celtic moving stadium to Rob Royston. He was actually the first one to, and that actually led to the breakdown in the relationship between him and Michael Kelly, which started the Celts for Change movement. You know what I mean? And so Brian Dempsey, as much as he's a fantastic figure in Celtic's history, the seeds were sowed by him in terms of moving away from Celtic Park in the first place, which wasn't a great idea. I don't think many Celtic fans were interested in that idea. I think they did a poll on STV. I remember there was a Sport Question edition, the Celtic board were on it, and I think 75% or whatever it is, the Celtic fans polled just didn't want to move away from Celtic Park. I think it would even get to the extent where they'd rather play with one stand and close terracing rather than move away from Celtic Park. And I stand by that. I think you don't move away from your spiritual home, mate, and unless it's this isn't the NFL or some sort of franchise we're talking about here. This is Celtic, and Brian Dempsey played a big part in that kind of idea from out there that Celtic might move stadium.
Do you think that's why Dempsey was invited on at the board in the first place then, Mark?
No, Dempsey was actually brought onto the board almost at the same time as Michael Kelly. It was a form of rebranding. You mentioned Terry Cassidy earlier on. Terry Cassidy he was brought in to be like some sort of PR guru and rebrand the club. But that's also what Michael Kelly's background was in PR as well. And so was actually Brian Dempsey. The two of them came in as a double act. And after 5 months, because of this Rob Royston project, Michael Kelly used his influence on the board and pushed Brian Dempsey out. Tom Grant and Jim Farrell, they actually stood shoulder to shoulder with Brian Dempsey and wanted him kept inside the club. So much so that Michael Kelly actually tried to force they two off the board before, ironically, including those two in the 5-way pact, which kept any Celtic board member from voting against the Kellys and the Whites, which meant they two families, but the 5 principal shareholders owned about 60% of the club, and basically meant those 5 people, there's no way they could be voted against, and they can't vote against each other. And Brian Dempsey being ousted by Michael Kelly was just the start of that. But ironically, that's what started the Celts for Change, because Brian Dempsey was seen as a visionary by the Celtic fans. He had friends in high places. I think Matt McGowan wasn't slowing back the guy and on the fanzines, not the viewings, etc. And but I didn't for day one. You probably still remember the photograph of the two of them with the Celtic Smiles Better cake, because Michael Kelly was just off the back of the Glasgow Smiles Better campaign. He was the Lord Provost before he came to Celtic, and that was in 1990. That actually started what happened in 1994 when Michael Kelly came onto the board. He was a dinosaur in all ways. Even as far on as 2005, in an interview, he said that he wouldn't have alcohol branding, he wouldn't have any form of advertising that was against his principles, although he was happy to advertise cigarettes at the stadiums in the 90s. But I don't think he didn't last long under Michael Kelly, John, if you remember right. And I think what I think might have happened is, apart from the Rob Royston plans, I think probably similar to Don Mackay, Brian Dempsey was just seen as somebody who was just too forward thinking, a visionary, and somebody who could move the club forward at a pace that the Celtic board weren't ready for yet.
Was the comment here from Pato says, quite appropriately sums it up. The Cambuslang site was mostly an industrial polluted site in Scotland. As I've wrote here in my notes, a toxic site for a toxic board. How very, very appropriate.
Wow, mate, that's right up there with some of the best quotes I've had in this show, mate. That's a good one.
Because it's so true. The rumour at the time was, they had to go on and deny that it wasn't, it was safe and all that. But it was a toxic wasteland essentially, and I just summed it up perfectly. But
mate, listen, it was a good job. It was a good job that the grass was green when about it, because the fucking air was green. It was that toxic. You know what I mean? It was. I mean, come on. I mean, I don't know who the guy was that got to stand in that meeting and say to all the press that it was safe, but he must have moved country very quickly, because there's no way the guy could have got another job again.
Well, the price of this super stadium, and keep in mind Celtic is quite well known at this point. We're not doing too well financially, but apparently the rumoured price of this was going to exceed 100 million quid to build this whole site. So naturally, our creditors in that, suddenly their ears would perk up, like, wait a minute. Celtic have got all this funding and money, so it all came to a head in February in 1994. The Cambuslang project, in the face of absolutely intolerable pressure, the board had to call an emergency press conference. Quite dramatic announcement was made that Cambuslang was still a reality. Chairman Kevin Kelly, Deputy Chairman David Smith, and Patrick Nally of Superstadia faced the media and delivered one of the most astonishing addresses ever given to Scottish football press. Smith told the gathered press that the funding for Cambuslang was in place thanks to a London-based company called Geffinor, I believe it's pronounced. However, at this car crash of a press conference, they very subtly announced that the stadium would now be a 40,000-seater stadium rather than a 52,000-seater stadium, which nobody in the Associated Press seemed to pick up on at the time. But very subtly, the attendance is now dropped by 12,000. They also announced that there'd be a share issue, which would finally allow fans to buy shares, and the board were being led to believe had come through against all the odds, and these plans for a brave new Celtic world would be ratified at an EGM later that year. But it didn't take too long for the press to do a wee bit of digging and find out that this was quite a sham, because Geffinor were contacted and they denied any knowledge of finding money to give the Celtic board, and Superstadia, the company who were going to be building it, they were basically denying all knowledge as well. So a bombshell, however, dropped a week later as well when Geffinor went public to the press as well and just said that they had nothing to do with the Celtic plan. So everything was now beginning to fall apart as we entered into March 1994. Sales for Change ramped up the pressure on the club and the fans attending games. Creditors were now beginning to call in loans. It really couldn't continue. But luckily, guys, a Canadian wearing a Bunnet wasn't too far away to come and become our saviour, because yes, Sales for Change and the takeover. So this is the key moment. See, we've just entered into March 1994, and as you said earlier on, Mark, this is not the first time that Fergus McCann had any dealings with the club. He had approached them before about investing and tried to over, and obviously the board didn't want anything to do with it. But now things are getting, the pressure's kind of coming up a wee bit on them, because see, the banks are now calling in loans. Now, am I right in saying, is this story true that Celtic's money that they owed compared to what Rangers owed was actually like night and day? Like, because Rangers had a much bigger overdraft, because David Murray had friends in high places at the banks, they were getting away with a lot more.
Yeah, they had operating losses of 6.5 million that season, I think. So that and Rangers, although they had losses, it's a wee bit of a myth that Rangers were in a bit of a state at that time, because they had a company being backed by Murray Holdings, so their assets were probably secured. I mean, Celtic Park was used as a bargaining chip by the board to keep the banks at bay. So when Fergus McCann flew into Glasgow, his first stop was to go to the Bank of Scotland and put £1 million of his own money into a bond, which meant, although he had no control over Celtic, he secured Celtic's future. At that very moment, Celtic's future was safe.
Mm.
So he then travels directly from the bank to Celtic Park. Again, there's still not any clue where he's going to be in charge of Celtic. History will tell you that it was only a matter of time before they get in, but at that point he never knew exactly if he was going to get in. I think the businessmen behind the deal would have told him it was secure as it could be. But when he arrived at the steps of Celtic Park, he hadn't had anything confirmed yet. But it was at that point that Chris White, he was a majority shareholder in the club secretary. He had to actually step down and sell his shares to Fergus McCann. Now, the most disgusting part about our story is Michael Kelly, a man who claimed that he gave nothing to Celtic but devotion and took a measly salary. This is 1994. He requested £300 per share, and it was reported at the time that he got no more than employees' compensation. But Fergus McCann, 10 years or so later, confirmed that he paid like £190, £180 per share. So he walked away with a lot of money through that deal. But Fergus McCann, at the same, paid £1 million up front, secured the deal. Ironically, the board didn't change much. This is something that people don't maybe not remember too good.
Yeah.
The board, Tom Grant, Jim Farrell stayed on the board.
That's right.
Kevin Kelly, I think heart was in the right place. He kept his name on. Kept on the board. Brian Dempsey didn't come in as a director, but although he came in as an investor. Dominic Keane came in as a director, and Fergus McCann obviously came in as owner / majority shareholder. That same week, Fergus McCann had to also pledge a £5 million bond to secure the debts of Celtic, and that in turn gave Celtic another £7.5 million overdraft from the bank, which was at the time proposed to stabilise the club and give Lee McCarry funds for new players. But Lee McCarry's jacket was already in a shaky hook, so the investment didn't come automatically for the right reasons, thinking back. But there's a few myths about the takeover. I think we mentioned Jerry Wiseman earlier on. He was part of a consortium to buy Celtic as well. Jim Kerr was part of a consortium to buy Celtic. There was loads of meetings going on. Fergus McCann just put his money where his mouth was and secured the debt.
Yeah.
Now, it might have been 20 to 12 at night when, however it was, when everything was formalised, and it makes good copy to say that Celtic were minutes away from being in receivership. But the fact of the matter is, it was more of a power struggle and a grab for power that was going to dictate who took the reins at Celtic Park. Fergus McCann had a history of being a good businessman and a very wealthy one at that, you know what I mean? And as far back as the 70s, he was making live streams for Celtic matches. I think he was the first man ever to do a pay-per-view live stream, I think in 1970 for the cup final against Feyenoord. And the guy's got a history of being an innovator, you know. And when he first came over to Celtic Park, I think it was in 1987, to speak to the Celtic chairman at the time, and David Smith and Chris White and Kevin Kelly was in charge, and he said that he rebuffed a £5 million offer by Fergus McCann to take over then and there. Although it was reported that Fergus McCann just wanted to get in the board at the time, but that more or less meant he was just getting the first steps to take over the club. But one of the things he asked the club when he went through the papers and done due diligence was just to ask, look, why don't you have season ticket holders? And I mean, you've got maybe 2,000-3,000, and you've got a stadium that holds 40, 50, 60,000, and the board just turned around and said to him, this is in Fergus McCann's own words, that we don't want season ticket holders, they're needy. They want too much. They agitate for things. They're loud, you know. And Fergus McCann just couldn't understand this. And see, the Celtic board, the biggest guilt that they had, it wasn't trying to run Celtic into the ground, because that wasn't the case. I mean, the Whites and the Kellys owned Celtic basically since the minute it was formed. They just weren't businessmen. I mean, I'll tell you something that's quite ironic, and the other two guys might even know this. See, Michael Kelly, he's got a degree in economics. So David Smith, the vice chairman, he I mean, I don't know if you remember when Molly Faulkner signed for Celtic. That deal took 12 days to take over the line.
Mm.
And the reason why that took 12 days to take over the line is because David Smith lied to the board. David Smith told the board that there was just problems with getting the contract over the line. The fact of the matter is, he was trying to raise together £200,000 to get the deal done. And if you remember that day, Celtic, Ferguson McCann took over. David Smith standing at Glasgow Airport denying these allegations, and was telling the press that he wasn't going to quit. 2 years later, he arrived at Celtic Park and was quit. I don't know if he was sacked or he was quit, but he was lying to the Celtic board about the financial situation of the club, and it's how a guy had a degree in economics let this happen under his watch. It's incompetence, but there was no malice involved. The guy just was a bit of a fantasist, that Michael Kelly, and it almost makes you wonder what was going on at the time and who was lying to who. I mean, Celtic beginning in the 1990s made a profit, but as I mentioned earlier on, with a financial controller, I think his name was, his title was, and that was Peter Lawwell, believe it or not. And,
that man again.
Very young Peter Lawwell, and to his credit, Celtic made a profit that year. But that profit turned into a £1.5 million loss and a £7.5 million overdraft that Celtic couldn't afford.
Wow, God almighty. That's very good knowledge there, Mark. I knew I was right to get you on the
Sorry
night,
for
mate.
boring you, mate.
No, mate, no. You'd said before the show anyway, says, well, if you indulge me on the board part, because that's good knowledge, mate. That's fantastic stuff. Because, but Liam, I'll come to you here, mate, because it'd be rude if I don't do this, because you're a man in Canada. Fergus McCann, got any good wee Fergus stories from over that side relating to Celtic? Because I'd imagine he's looked at it in a very positive light. Well, he is all around the world, but especially being over in Canada as well.
So I never seen it. I went to the Montreal club, and that was probably after about 95, 96, 97. I was going to the Montreal club then. And so Fergus was still very much in the light. I think he just left at that point or was close to leaving. So I was asked the guys, so does Fergus McCann come to this club? And you'd get asked. And you'd hear various stories, but I was expecting to some Uber Tim, up there in the chairs, leading off the singing and all that. And no. I mean, you wouldn't know he supported Celtic. Like, he wasn't a huge, vocal, colourful guy about him, but he was a businessman. And times as well, I heard for one of the guys that ran the club, that when he did come back, and this is, after he'd bought the club, and I think he'd thrown out a remark that was just somewhat disparaging about, I think they had put a Celtic logo on a T-shirt or something like that, or part of a flag for the wall, and, Fergus said, that's my logo. I own that. Typically Glaswegian to a guy that's been in Canada for 40 years, get to fuck.
Well, Patrick McLaughlin says Fergus sacked my wee mate for throwing bin bags in the bin too violently. That was Fergus McCann through. He's quite a bullish wee character, wasn't he? And you think nowadays with the way the press treat us and stuff like that, and the way some officials treat us out in the park, that Fergus was still, if we had somebody of that stature as the chairman of the club, then my God, they wouldn't be doing what they do to us. They wouldn't get away with it because that was his character through and through.
Well, he never did let them. I mean, he effectively got Jim Farry sacked, didn't he, over the George Cadet affair? I mean, I think we've heard it being said on the bus before. It's about time Celtic stood up for some of these things that are going to. Fergus McCann wouldn't have needed told to be standing up to defend Celtic. For all he was, I don't know, what was he, about 8 stone in a heavy wet duffel coat with a bonnet on, but he never backed out of a fight. I mean, like say over the George Cadet situation when they delayed the registration of him, and so therefore he missed at least one Rangers game.
Yep.
And others obviously. He proved that Farry had fucked about basically and delayed the registration of George Cadet, therefore denying Celtic the opportunity of playing a player that they were rightfully employed to play for them.
I remember.
I think if Fergus picked a fight with you were in trouble.
Aye. What were you going to say?
He got in a lot of trouble he stopped calling his fans and started calling his customers.
Yeah.
That's very American Canadian.
It
I'll
is,
tell you a
isn't
funny
it?
story
Yeah.
about Fergus McCann. When Celtic, you remember the big pylons, the big pylons at Celtic Park? They had to tear them down or move them when they were building the new stadium. But what happened was there was lots of complaints about the TV signal going wonky. So Fergus McCann, being the absolute genius that he was, just put a statement out just saying anybody that lives in Kilmarnock or the Parkhead area, just come to the front reception with your TV licence and we'll refund you a full year's TV licence. Anybody that lived in Parkhead and Kilmarnock hasn't bought a TV licence since the day they came out. And also, a funny one, there was a time when a Celtic scout went over to, I don't know what country it was, he went to go and scout some players and they came back and he was handing in, I mean, this guy was that much a controller that the petty cash went through him. That's crazy, but his petty cash was to get signed off by him, and his sheet said Chicken Kiev, and he shouted them into the office and says, next time you buy Chicken Kiev, get it without the Kiev. I'm not paying £4 for a bit of chicken. And that's a really funny story. But on a serious note, did they know he hired a psychiatrist to look at Hugh Dallas's reaction to the coin being thrown at Celtic Park?
Right.
So if you two guys remember that, he hired a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, without any shadow of doubt, in his expert opinion, the penalty decision was based on emotion rather than any other. So it was confirmation bias the minute any challenge was made there. Do you remember that, guys? Aye.
I don't remember some talk about the thing, but I don't remember exactly what it was about. I do remember.
He had a psychiatrist, mate. Aye.
Yeah, I do remember somebody putting in he was a tight ass bastard. And did Andy Walker not claim that when he signed from Bolton coming back to Celtic, he asked for a Celtic shirt so he could, for the presentation, and when he got his fucking wage packet, Ferguson docked the cost of the shirt off the wage packet.
That's right.
My God. Wow.
Mate, listen, but see, me mentioned the relationship with the press. That actually goes back to Michael Kelly. When Michael Kelly took over, he had a disgust for the press and a distrust for the press. So that bleeds into relationships with press and bleeds into what press are kind to you when it comes to reporting. And Fergus McCann got the back end of that. Fergus McCann walked into a club that had a mistrust for the press and vice versa. But that was Michael Kelly that really started that. Celtic, right up until then, had a good relationship with the press, and Jock Stein was always famous for flinging a story. If Rangers won a big match or won a cup, Jock Stein was always famous for telling the press that he'd scouted some youth player that was going to be the next Danny McGrain, the next Keir Dalglish or something like that, And so Celtic had a good relationship with the press right up until that point, and it started again with Michael Kelly. He's not a figure that Celtic fans have got a lot of love for, Michael Kelly, but that's one of the things he did do was start that ball rolling for the kind of the press having a wee bit of arc for Celtic and Celtic fans in general.
See, obviously talk about the press here. This is obviously building up to the infamous RIP Celtic headline as well on the for the takeover, the Sunday Mail or the Sun, whatever
Sunday
paper
Mail,
it was.
Sunday Record.
Yeah, it could be any of them, but either RIP. So I'll quickly sum up the events then of the Celts for Change movement and the takeover. So yeah, the only language that the board really speak at this point is obviously money. You've got to hit them in the bank accounts. That's the only way they're going to listen, because they're digging theirs. They're not backing down, folks. They are doubling down. But in 1993, a concerned group of Celtic supporters banded together for the Celts for Change pressure group in order to challenge the frustrations and near impotence that many fans were feeling over the events surrounding the club. The aim and focus was to channel all the supporters' energies in one direction and push for change within the club. So the original committee members were David Cunningham, Brendan Sweeney, Matt McGlone, Colin Duncan and John Thompson. And the motto, which still gets wheeled out a lot even to this day, is back the team, sack the board. It would become synonymous with that era, albeit it's a little less drastic nowadays, but it still comes out from time to time. One of the main tactics of Celts for Change was to tell fans to boycott games. It wasn't always a very popular one and could cause some real divide between fans. Now, John, I know you'd said that you'd kind of stopped going to games at that point, but you must have caught wind that this is what Celts for Change were doing. What was your feelings on that? Would you think that, well, obviously it forced change in the end, it would pay off, but were you one of the ones that stood with Celts for changing that one? Like, you know, I agree what you are doing, or
Oh yeah, because I'd already pretty much, without necessarily calling it, you know, a protest. I got to the stage where, like I said, you know, I was a lot younger then. I had a young family. David, for example, he was about 3 probably at the time, and it was just a case of I didn't really have the time to be going to home and away games, and just and the money it was. And although it's nothing in comparison to what it costs nowadays to go to a game, but it just got to the stage where, well, I've got a choice. I can spend this money doing that, or I can spend it doing that, and that's a fucking waste of time. You know, that is just. I mean, I'm meant to go to the football to enjoy myself, to have some entertainment, see my team win, and I wasn't getting any of that.
Yeah.
So I just thought, nah, I'm just going to stop going. I'm not going to. I did actually say, I'm just not going to give the bastards my money.
Yeah, totally. And see, Stephen Colstart here says he remembers
boycotting. The reason why I didn't go to games at Ibrox. I've never been to a Celtic Years game at Ibrox because I think at that time, if I remember rightly, the home team kept their gate receipts.
Ah, okay.
I'm sure there was a spell when the home teams kept virtually the whole gate receipts. I said, I'm not giving them my fucking money. You know, I'll spend it at Celtic Park, but I'm not spending it at Ibrox. I'll spend it at Tannadice, Dens Park. I'm just not going to Ibrox. But I'd already pretty much
principle. I like it.
I'd stopped, not necessarily financially, not necessarily protest. I'm just not enjoying it anymore. I'm just not going. It's a waste of time.
Scunnered would be the word. You were scunnered.
That would be the word.
Stephen Coltart does say here he remembers boycotting the games. He actually did it a few times. As I said at the start of the show, if you were, you know, standing with Celts for changing that, you'll get your comments in because I'm interested to see how many of our viewers actually did get involved in that. And as I say, a watershed moment was about to come though, because the Celts for Change had worked out that for Celtic to maintain the running cost, they would need 10,000 fans in every game. So if they could get the number down below 10,000, that would be the breakthrough that they need. And on March the 2nd, 1994, 8,225 fans went to a game against Kilmarnock, which we lost, by the way. We actually lost that one. And this was only 2 days for the takeover. So Celts for Change had worked out the running cost needed 10,000. They'd finally broke through it. So now it was a point where that's it. The Celtic board knew the game was up because it was only going to get worse from there. And of course, as we've talked about earlier on, this is the point when Fergus McCann comes in along with Brian Dempsey and, as they were called, the Rebels. They forced through the takeover, obviously, on March the 4th, 1994. Brian Dempsey stood on the steps outside Celtic Park and proudly proclaimed that the game is over, the Rebels have won. Celtic were now saved, as Marcus said earlier on. It does make for good copy that we were minutes away from extinction, but it wasn't quite that. But it does make for a good moment where it's the game's over, the Rebels have won. It's an iconic moment, which brings us on though to this point, the sort of final word on tonight, and it is the legacy of it. So this is something that gets brought up a lot regarding Fergus McCann. Surely, at the very least, he deserves a statue or a stand to be named after him at Celtic Park. Surely, you would think.
I wouldn't say a statue because that should be for football greats, and I think the man built the stadium with our money. Don't get me wrong. The man built the stadium. I think there should at least be, if not a stand, it's been. I feel like the main stand has been waiting for somebody to claim the name of it. Why Bunnet hasn't been named for the main stand, I do not know. I mean, the North Stand and the main stand aren't named yet. And Barry McNeil and for me, what do you call him? Tommy Burns. I mean, they two are legends for Celtic. You know what I mean? And they lived through the biggest and best moments for Celtic. You know what I mean? And they should have at least have some sort of memorial. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a tough one. I think statues should be for the founding father who was there. There is one, Jimmy Johnson, Barry McNeil. I don't think we can just start building statues for figures in the club, mate. And I did get your point. I think Tommy Burns should have the Lennoxtown named after him. Yeah, I think Barry McNeil should have the main stand because he's the greatest ever player we've ever had. It's certainly the greatest ever captain, the most iconic. But the North Stand, I think they're waiting for. I don't know what Celtic are waiting for. We've got the Jock Stein and Barry McNeil stands, and I don't know what it is because. And surely it's a PR it's a PR tap in for the club to rebrand one of the stands. It starts to create merchandise, etc., etc. So I really don't know. Fergus McCann, for me, I wouldn't have a stand named after him or a statue just personally, mate.
Yep.
But the guy should be honoured immortally in some way for Celtic. Maybe that's
sorry, but it wouldn't surprise me actually. I mean, obviously, I don't know the guy, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's not bothered about anything like that.
It wouldn't surprise me either, to be fair.
It might just be one of these things where don't do anything like that for me because I'm not really interested in it.
It would be nice.
And I don't think it would be, but it would be nice. And I would actually, I wouldn't go as far as to disagree, but we do have a statue for Brother Wilfred, who started us all off.
Yep.
And
yeah, he's
as far as you know, and I think if it wasn't for Fergus, I don't know if we'd be sitting here talking about Celtic from. If we were having a Celtic podcast now, it would probably stop somewhere in the early 90s. We wouldn't have anything to talk about after that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think I'm not saying it has to be out the front and it has to be in anybody's face.
See like a bronze.
Fergus is interested in that kind of thing.
A bronze bust inside. See that inside the director's box, or even inside the director's suite, like a bronze bust of him, or maybe just something as comical as his wee hat or something sitting there. Bunnet, you know.
Aye.
You know, but I think Brother Wilfred, there was actually 3 men that started Celtic. It wasn't just him, but he was a key member. He did the exact same for Fulham as well. Actually, Brother Wilfred, he helped lay the seeds for Fulham Football Club as well. But I think just for me personally, mate, I think when you start laying statues left, right, and centre, know that you're suggesting that it loses its feeling. You know what I mean? I think Billy McNeil just standing at the foot of the Celtic Way is the greatest ever player we've ever had. You just look up and you see Jock's Dean, the greatest manager, Jimmy Johnston, the guy loved by everybody, and in the middle, the guy who started the club.
Yeah.
And for me, that just seems like perfect symmetry. If you want to start darting other Lisbon Lions down the Celtic Way, I'm all for that. I think the Lisbon Lions. I mean, I don't care if we get to the English Premiership and win 5 more European Cups. For me, the Lisbon Lions will always be the Celtic team. For me, I don't think anybody should ever forget their names. And if you want to start darting trophy statues for them, I'm all for that. But in terms of guys like Scott Brown and things like that, I just don't think they're no immortalised the same way these guys are. And Fergus McCann kept the club a growing concern, and he deserves every bit of good press he gets. And I don't know, it just, for me, it's a tough one. And don't forget, this is the Celtic fans who booed Fergus McCann when he unfurled the flag when they stopped 10 in a row.
That's right. 98.
I mean,
I don't statue for the obvious. He looks too much like Mr. Burns. You have to explain it.
That's what he does.
Who's that guy up there?
Well, Monty Burns.
But you know what? Other than that, I think he deserves recognition in a way. But you said it earlier. You'd throw him a party or a stand. You don't even know if he would show up. You know,
you're right. You're actually right.
A guy that might know, he might be happy about it and that, maybe tell his grandkids and stuff. But I don't know if he'd come and actually enjoy it. You know, he just looks like one of the, just a wee weird guy and all that. But thank Christ he was our wee guy at the right time.
Aye. So this is the guy that came in and had a 5-year plan. And he stuck to it. He says, I'll be here for 5 years, rebuild the stadium, win you the league, try and get his back playing the Celtic way. And he did. He delivered all of it. But yeah, he's a very, I'd say, fuss-free type of guy, of what you're describing there. He doesn't really want all that palaver, all that stuff. He just wants to get on with his job. And he certainly did. So for that, we are very, very thankful, because it's been quite an interesting trip down memory lane. As I say, we've went through the full spectrum of the absolute worst of the early 90s, and we've actually had quite a big audience all night. I've been watching it. Plus, Mark, you've been getting a lot of love in the chat, mate, for your knowledge tonight, mate. Phenomenal.
Surprised at that, mate.
And well deserved as well.
Well deserved, mate. As I said, tonight was a mission for me, with learning from me. You'll get the knowledge for you guys, because a lot of it I didn't really know. I can only just go by archive, but that was phenomenal stuff. So yeah, we will now of course, as we do, we'll finish on the trivia. Now, I can do it like I did last week. We can do like round the table at last man standing. So it'll be like, I'll come to Liam. You give me an answer. If it's right, then I move on to John. If you get it wrong, you're out. And then any ones you don't get, we'll go to the comments and see if they can get it. So turn off your comments. Well, Mark, you don't need it because you can't see it, can you? Because you're on your mobile.
How do you do that? Like, remember, I'm a bit of a technophobe.
Oh, is your comments even displaying? Do you even have the comments?
No, actually, no.
You're all right then. No worries. No worries. Okay, so the question for anyone that's came in late, 'cause I always do a question. So it was, the Celtic won the 10 and 6s in 1992. Crazy. I'm looking for the 10 Celtic players that were registered to play in that. So what I'll just do is I'll just go round in a clockwise motion. So Liam, I'm coming to you first, mate. Have you got any from that squad?
Paul Byrne.
No, mate. Paul Byrne was not in it. You're out at the first hurdle, mate. Oh no!
Come on, you.
Paul Byrne was in the Celtic. It's down that one, mate.
That's in his head for the show, though. To be fair to him, I think it's been placed in his head.
It has. Paul Byrne ingrained in your mind.
It's me next, is it?
It is, Johnny.
Yep, on you go, mate.
John Collins?
Yes, John Collins was in the squad. Mark.
I did an easy one. Marshall in goals.
Yeah, Gordon Marshall. Yes, he was indeed. I feel bad for Liam. Should we give him one more? I feel bad.
Come
on, Liam. Come back in, mate. Come on.
All right. Paul McStay.
No, Paul McStay was the team either. He wasn't registered for that one. Oh, mate. Oh, down another drink, mate. Down another one.
McStay. Can I get one more McStay?
Oh, unlucky, mate. Unlucky. So, Johnny, over to you, mate. We've got 2 out of the 10.
Peter Grant?
Peter Grant wasn't in. Mark, you are flying solo, mate. So, if you
Tom
don't
Boyd.
get... No, mate. Tom Boyd wasn't in it either. No,
I've got a few that I know in it. But I can tell you a few that I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Andy Walker.
No.
Tony Cascarino, he scored the top goal scorer.
Yes, Cascarino was.
I've got on my list there, Mark. I've got Cascarino / Boyd, depending on when it was and when we done the transfer.
Cascarino was in.
Stevie Filton.
Stevie Filton was in, yes.
I was going to say, I think I remember seeing Simon Donnelly. Am I making that up in my head?
Simon Donnelly wasn't there. Too early for
Andy
Simon
Walker.
Donnelly.
That's the one.
Andy Walker's been said, so he's out.
I've got a few here. Hang on, written down. Tony Cascarino, Marshall, I've written down. Let me think. Who would that team be? Hang on a minute. I might be wrong here because I might be totally wrong. Was Joe Miller?
Joe Miller was in the team, yes. So that's 5 out of the 10.
So is it only one keeper or 2 keepers?
They only had one
Stuart
keeper.
Kerr might be a sub-keeper. Is that
keeper.
only one keeper? Trying to think of the backline. So obviously, I thought Tom Boyd was in. I can't believe that.
Well, I take it to the comments and start.
Was Anton Rogan in it?
Anton Rogan wasn't. What did you say there, Mark?
Derek White.
Derek White, yes. Well done, mate. Derek White was. So take it to the comments and see what they're saying, because there's a lot of coming in right now. So I'll scroll down and see if we've got...
What about Willie Faulkner?
Willie Faulkner wasn't, mate, but this one was from Monty. Chris Morris is a correct answer.
Was he in that? I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have got that.
Chris Morris was in.
China.
Feed the Bear said McAvenny, but McAvenny wasn't. However, I think I saw another one from Monty as well coming in. Brian and Neil was in the 10.
Tommy Coyne.
No, Tommy Coyne is not. So we only need one. We only need 2 more. And the one that I thought... Jerry Craney is correct, yes. Now, I knew...
I was no far after Tommy Coyne's appearance, is it really?
When I looked at the names, I went, right, this guy will be the last one without a shadow of a doubt. I'm looking through the comments if anyone's got them. So
just
far...
Give a clue, but give me something that might just trigger
give a clue.
For money. Give me
That's a clue, Mark.
I mean, if I don't even know who he is, then Jesus, I mean, I can look up on Wikipedia and just see if there's anything that can trigger a clue. But yeah, let's have a wee look. Have a wee look. I'll tell you, man, through Wikipedia, because nobody's got it so far in the comments.
Was it Stuart Slater? No, it wouldn't be.
No, it wasn't Slater, mate. It wasn't him. Yeah, it's not. I mean, I'm looking at his career stats now, and he is. There is
Give me a few
nothing here.
clubs. Give me a few clubs, mate.
Alloa, Athletic, Partick Thistle, East Fife, Morton, then Celtic. That's his career trajectory.
Steve, Michael? Cahill? No?
You're getting closer. I'm looking again at the...
He was a centre half.
Oh, wait a minute. Stephen Coulthard has came in with the win and he's tapped it in on the line. It was Donaghy. It was Mark Donaghy. That was the one. When I looked at the 10, I was like, who is that? So we've got Chris Morris, Gordon Marshall, Brian O'Neill, Derek White, Jerry Craney, Tony Cascarino, Stevie Fulton, John Collins, Joe Miller, and Mark Donaghy were the 10 men. The Roll of Honour, folks. The 10 men that won the 10 and 6s in 1992.
That was a good one, Phil, mate. That was actually... I love shit like that.
I knew that name would be the hardest one to get, but well done, Stephen Coulthard, on getting the last one.
Never heard of him, mate. Honestly, if you showed me a picture of him with his buff lines and his man back, you confirm who it was. Still waiting who he is.
I'm going to have to look and see if I do recognise him, to be honest with you, but...
when we finish up, I'll put the picture up. I'll share the screen and put the picture of the winning team up, and it'll be like, even when you look at him, you'll just be like, I can't remember him at all. But yeah, when I read the 10, I was like, I don't know who Mark Donaghy is. But yeah, well done, Stephen Coulthard, on getting it. That's good stuff. So yeah, that wraps up tonight's show, and it has been a good one to go back to look at the bad times, because it makes you appreciate just where Celtic are now. But yeah, in terms of what's coming up for the rest of the week on the bus, tomorrow is the Thursday Night Forum. Russell will be back tomorrow. I can confirm it. He's been saying that he'll be back on Thursday. I know he's missed the last 2 nights. Monday was a little bit tender. He hadn't even got home as of yesterday. That's why myself, Mark, and David stepped in on the Tuesday club, or Monday club on a Tuesday. Obviously, we've done this tonight. So yeah, tomorrow he's back on. Friday, the plan is me and him will be on as well, doing the bookie bash, and even though we're absolutely terrible at it, as the league table already shows. And then Saturday there'll be a post-match push for the Ross County game, and it'll be the Sunday Blair with Regan and Mark and another on Sunday. So yeah, a lot of things still to come. So guys, if you've enjoyed yourselves tonight on your Bustalgia experience,
yeah, I certainly have, and certainly enjoyed Mark's knowledge of the background shenanigans that would go on.
Mark loves talking about the board. Yeah. He loves talking about the board.
Yeah, your favourite subject, I think, Mark.
Specialist subject, mastermind.
Specialist subject, starter for 10, yeah.
Oh, I think you're right there, John. Unfortunately, mate, I've got a lot of material that not a lot of it's complimentary when it comes to the board.
Well, the contrast to this show, because we're going from a real one extreme to another, because that's obviously the early 90s. Next week's Bustalgia is the 2016-17 season. It is the Invincible treble season. Yes, that is next week.
Am I on that one, Phil?
If you wish to be, you can come on if you wish. Because Liam, obviously, he's like my partner in crime for this one with all that knowledge that he's got. So Liam, we'll try and get you on again, mate. And yeah, I'll try and get you on.
I just can't remember if you asked me, but if you're looking for me to come on, I've got a lot of good memories about that season. That was
loads of good memories.
That was a really exciting season for Celtic, and
it was.
I think for me, it was probably the most excited I've ever been as a Celtic fan. Was that pre-season, watching Rodgers sculpt a team that was just a different planet for anybody else.
Right. It was very purposely placed. As I say, we've went from this talking about the grim 90s. I was like, what's the season? What can we follow this up with that's a real opposite to it? And I went, I know what to do. So yeah, we'll be talking about the 2016-17 season next week on Bustalgia. So yeah, folks, we'll wrap it up there. And thanks for everyone that's tuned in. Again, just remember, like, comment, share, all that other good stuff. And if you wish to become a member, then you can do so as well. But yeah, we are out of here for another week. So again, thanks everybody for watching, and we shall catch you all later. See yous.
Thanks, guys. His comments about me deliberately trying to cause controversy. Well, I work in the media now, and you've got someone sitting there next to you who's an embarrassment to the media profession. He's an apologist. He's a charlatan.